Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening, and his physique had grown far stronger compared to when he first arrived in this world. The master didn't seem to mind the cold at all. Still, out of concern, Rhodes summoned Warm and placed it in front of McGraw to act as a windshield. The fully automatic, intelligent heating device, Warm, consumed 1.0 delicacy for every 100 kilometers traveled. Though it wouldn't complain if you fed it 10 or 20 more. Since it was winter, the scenery outside the city felt bleak and empty. Whenever a solid building appeared in the landscape, it gave off a striking sense of contrast, especially for those unfamiliar with the area. Wow! Rhodes couldn't help but gasp a little. Having never seen much of the world, it was his first time getting a close look at a villa like this. A sense of anticipation welled up inside him. However, after following McGraw inside, his excitement quickly faded. The interior felt surprisingly ordinary, not nearly as grand as the luxury hotel he had stayed at during their visit to the capital. Maybe this was what they called low-key luxury. Either way, Rhodes didn't really get it. Looks like we arrived a little early, McGraw said casually, glancing around the empty conference hall. He didn't spot any of the familiar faces he was expecting. Come on, let's go drop off our luggage first. Over the next few days, all participants would be eating and staying here, with the costs shared among the various guilds. Chapter 195, At worst, you can speak for me. Since the venue was large enough, each guild master was assigned their own suite. After dropping off his luggage, Rhodes wasn't quite sure what to do next. McGraw said casually. Don't be so stiff. Even though it's a formal venue, the atmosphere here isn't that serious. Just relax and treat it like you're staying at a regular hotel. Can I go explore a bit? As long as you don't tear the place down, do whatever you want. Got it. I'll be back later. Make sure you come back to the banquet hall for lunch. The meeting won't start until the afternoon. Waving, Rhodes left the room. Take over, Scuttle Crab. McGraw watched as Rhodes vanished into a green afterimage and thoughtfully twisted his beard. That form seems to boost his water mobility and visual perception. Humphrey, is this kid checking for safety hazards? He was spot on. Rhodes was indeed using the opportunity to scout the venue for anything suspicious while also familiarizing himself with the surrounding terrain. Since he was tagging along with the master this time, Rhodes hadn't brought much gear. He was just being cautious and taking a look around. Meanwhile, the other guild masters had started arriving one after another. Some caught sight of a green blur flashing past but didn't think much of it. Rhodes noted that most of the guild masters weren't particularly alert. Despite him looking quite suspicious starting around, no one even stopped to question him. By noon, Rhodes had completed his tour. Thinking about it, it made sense. With so many powerful guild masters gathered in one place, who would be foolish enough to stir up trouble? When Rhodes arrived at the banquet hall, more than 40 people had already gathered, sitting in small groups at various tables. Before they left, McGraw had explained that about 30 guilds typically attended these meetings, and sometimes a few extra people would tag along, either aides or promising younger members like Rhodes. There were around 500 official wizard guilds across the continent of Ishkar, and nearly 100 in Fiori alone. A regional guild alliance with over 30 guilds was no small organization. McGraw spotted Rhodes and waved. Finally back. Come over here, Rhodes. Master. Rhodes said, walking over to the table, and immediately spotted a familiar face. President Goldmine, nice to see you again. Ah, it's you. Hello, hello. Goldmine said warmly, clearly remembering him. Ha 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 ha. McGraw laughed proudly. How about it? This is Rhodes. He joined Fairy Tale just half a year ago. He's only been studying magic for 6 months, and he's already become an outstanding wizard. Isn't that impressive? So you're Rhodes? How adorable. The speaker was. Well, eye-catching. Bald, with rosy blush painted on his cheeks, bright pink heart-shaped lipstick, a pink vest, tiny fairy wings on his back, and high heels. Rhodes recognized him immediately. Bob, the guild master of Blue Pegasus. You're President Bob of Blue Pegasus? It's an honor to meet you. Rhodes said, keeping a polite smile despite feeling a little overwhelmed. Bob rested his cheek on his hand and said with a twinkle, "Oh my. So polite, so adorable. Also, I should thank Hibiki from your guild for his help with that previous matter." Rhodes made sure to maintain his composure. This table was clearly filled with Makarov's close friends. He couldn't afford to be rude. Still, Rhodes privately thought, between Agaya, who Raza had trouble dealing with, and now President Bob, Blue Pegasus was truly a challenging guild. Makarov, utterly pleased, poured himself several more drinks and started bragging about how well Rhodes had performed on their last major job, even earning praise from the Magic Council. After hearing that, the other guild masters around the table nodded in understanding. For a young wizard to pull off such a difficult task at his age, he definitely had a promising future ahead of him. "Oh, I think I heard some rumors about him. Something about a beast tamer, right? I vaguely remember hearing that too." A few guild masters nodded, recalling some gossip they had heard about Rhodes. "Ha ha ha." Makarov laughed heartily, raising his cup. "I told you, the children from our guild are the best." Rhodes felt more and more awkward the longer he listened. Now he finally understood how those poor kids felt when their parents publicly bragged about their embarrassing past. One day, he swore, once I tame a little dragon, he would ride it all over Fiori and make sure his nickname changed into something far cooler, like Dragon Knight or Dragon Tamer. But if he got too cocky, he might end up getting roasted by a dragon. Better to stay low-key for now. Beast Tamer wasn't so bad anyway. If someone underestimated him, he'd just lure them in for close combat and slap them silly with a red buff. After surviving through Makarov's show-off session, Rhodes finally sat down and quietly focused on eating. He had to admit, the food here was really good. From the conversations around the table, he gathered that the meals were personally handled by the master of a small guild. Their guild name was God of the Cooking Knife, and apparently, the main requirement to join was having at least some cooking skills. Rhodes didn't quite get why their founder had decided to open a wizard guild instead of a culinary school, but either way, he was grateful. Thanks to them, he was finally experiencing a bit of joy at this meeting. However, that happiness quickly turned into concern when he glanced at Makarov, who had clearly had a little too much to drink. "Master, are you sure you'll be okay for the meeting this afternoon? You drank quite a lot." "It's just a little wine. I'll sober up in no time." "Hiccup, you just hiccuped." "It's fine. If I can't make it, you can speak for me." "Hiccup, don't be ridiculous. How could I possibly speak at a meeting like this? I told you already, it's not that serious around here. Stop nagging so much. You're starting to sound like Myra." Rhodes. "Alright." At exactly 12:30 p.m. on January 15th, the master officially said that Myra is long-winded. President Bob chimed in sympathetically. "Oh my, Rhodes is working so hard." Rhodes laughed it off with a grin. "Haha, it's nothing, really." The first session of the regular meeting began at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Around 30 guild masters gathered in the conference hall and took their seats. Even though Makarov had said the meeting wouldn't be too formal, everyone had still changed into different clothes than what they wore at lunch. It wasn't necessarily a full formal uniform, but everyone wore something that clearly displayed their guild's emblem. Rhodes glanced around the hall, easily spotting the logos of well-known guilds like Quattro Cerberus and Blue Pegasus, as well as smaller guilds like Titan Nose, Headless Knight, and Sylph Labyrinth. Of course, there were a few logos he didn't recognize at all. Rhodes also noticed that Master Rubal of Kate Shelter, the guild where Wendy and Carla belonged, wasn't present. Maybe he didn't have time to attend, or perhaps he belonged to a different regional guild alliance altogether. Makarov's outfit was more striking than anyone else's. Beneath his coat, he wore his clothes emblazoned with the Fairy Tale Guild mark, and over it, he proudly wore the cloak that symbolized his status as one of the 10 wizard saints. Aside from Rhodes, there were about 10 other wizards standing behind their respective guild masters. It seemed that attendance besides the guild leaders were permitted at these meetings. There wasn't a strict seating arrangement either, guild masters mostly clustered near familiar faces. However, President Goldmine of Quattro Cerberus wasn't sitting next to Makarov this time. Instead, he took the main seat at the head of the hall. Standing up, Goldmine called out, "Since everyone's here, let's begin the first regular meeting of X784. It seemed this meeting would be chaired by him. The first topic for discussion today is the Kingdom of Fiori's current stance toward wizards." Goldmine began, his tone turning serious. "As we all know, wizards once went through a very dark era. Fortunately, the founding of official guilds helped unite us, and over time, we managed to turn that tide. Today, most nations are far friendlier toward magic, and our Kingdom of Fiori in particular has great admiration for it. Even so, government policies concerning magic are still something we must pay close attention to. They directly affect the future of wizards everywhere. I've heard that at this year's New Year's celebration in the capital, His Majesty the King mentioned during his speech that he hopes to organize a grand magic event sometime next year or the year after. Although no official format or rules have been decided yet, we should discuss what impact this could have on us. If necessary, we could even submit joint advice to the King, or offer assistance in shaping the rules. President Goldmine's speech was clear and weighty. Rhodes, who had only ever seen Goldmine acting childish and bickering with Makarov, was surprised by how reliable and serious he was when presiding over an official meeting. Chapter 196, Charge them head-on. The guild masters present at the meeting spoke freely, each voicing their opinions. Some believed the matter should be taken seriously, while others felt it was just a casual remark by the king and wasn't worth the fuss. As for Master Makarov, whom Rhodes admired greatly, he was nodding off like a chick pecking at rice. Rhodes tried nudging him awake twice, but it was no use. Left with no choice, he quietly pulled out a small notebook and started jotting down the key points for him. After the discussion about the upcoming wizard event wrapped up, Master Goldmine summarized the main points, reminding everyone to stay alert for any news related to it once they return to their guilds. It could very well become an opportunity to boost the standing of wizards even further. But if handled poorly, it might harm the reputation of their own guilds instead. Now, let's move on to the next topic, about the minor revisions to tax regulations made at the end of last year. Rhodes listened closely. He realized that, ever since he joined Fairy Tail, he had never once worried about paying taxes, or even thought about them, until earlier this month. He first became aware of it while helping Myra with the guild's annual reconciliation paperwork. Fiore's tax policy for regular wizards was surprisingly lenient, with most taxes paid directly by the guild itself. The tax rate was so low that it didn't even come out of a wizard's mission reward. Instead, it was taken from the deposit submitted by the client when posting a job request. Rhodes guessed that deposit covered taxes, service fees, and probably even a bit for advertising. For most jobs, the tax rate was about 1%, barely noticeable compared to the rewards. Fairy Tail also had its own rule: if a reward exceeded 1 million jewels, it would still be taxed as if it were just 1 million. No additional taxes piled on top. Basically, the guild took care of everything. Wizards like Rhodes didn't need to bother about taxes at all. Currently, Myra and Rhodes handled most of the administrative work, while Master Makarov only had to sign the documents and pay when necessary. Out of curiosity, Rhodes had even looked into the tax rates for merchants, workers, and farmers. After some comparison, he could only conclude, being a wizard wasn't half bad at all. The next topic concerns the kingdom's new decree promoting the development of magical tools, and the potential impacts on wizards who own them. Topic after topic followed. The guild masters debated each new decree the Kingdom of Fiore had issued, analyzing how they might affect the wizarding community and whether the local guild alliance should take collective action. The discussion, which had started at 2 o'clock, finally wound down close to 6 in the evening. Just as things were wrapping up, someone turned to Fairy Tail's master and asked, "Master Makarov, what's your view on all this?" Rhodes quietly nudged his unreliable president awake. Makarov jerked upright, slammed his palm on the table, and bellowed, "Charge them head on." Rhodes silently suspected that the old man had probably been dreaming about fighting someone. Still, he had to admit, that line sounded pretty impressive. Makarov's sudden outburst left the guild masters looking at one another, all a little bewildered. Bob, who was well acquainted with Makarov's antics, was already holding his face, shaking with laughter. Goldmine was struggling to hold back his chuckles but, as the one presiding over the meeting, had to maintain a straight face. Realizing something was wrong, Makarov subtly stretched his arm behind his back and tugged at the hem of Rhodes' clothes. It was just like a student dozing off in class, getting called on by the teacher, and frantically signaling their deskmate for help. Rhodes quickly cleared his throat and said, "What our master means is that regardless of whether the kingdom's policies benefit us directly or not, we must all stand united, face challenges together, and strive to create a better environment for the magical world. At Fairy Tail, we are committed to that goal and we sincerely hope that all of you will work with us toward it. In short, let's move forward together." Makarov nodded solemnly. Yes, that's exactly what I meant." "Well said, Master Makarov," praised one of the presidents. "A perfect way to wrap up today's meeting," added another. Goldmine, who had been holding back laughter the whole time, finally relaxed a little. "Looks like Master Makarov has taken over my closing speech, but since it's already been said, we'll adjourn here. Meeting dismissed." At the dinner gathering afterward, Goldmine wasted no time teasing Makarov, joking, "You almost embarrassed yourself again." Makarov turned red, though it was hard to tell whether it was from anger or drinking, and snapped back, leading to a lively round of bickering between the two old friends. No wonder you brought Rhodes here. President Bob said in a softer, almost gentle voice. He really is a wonderful boy. Rhodes found himself surprisingly used to Bob's way of speaking by now. Still, just to be safe, he made a mental note to look through a few more pictures of Myra later. Maybe it would help calm his nerves. That's right. McRiv suddenly clapped his hands, clearly inspired by Bob's words. Rhodes is like my own child. There's no difference between what he says and what I say. Shameless. Goldmine scoffed. Poorly Uzuka must be so disgusted with you that she refuses to come to the guild anymore. What does this have to do with her? McRiv snapped back, but he quickly put on a smug grin. Admit it, you're just jealous because our guild has such an outstanding young wizard. Hearing that, Goldmine couldn't back down. The kids from our guild aren't half bad either. Is that so? Well, this kid's about to become an S-class wizard before long. What's so special about S-class? Our guild has S-class wizards around the same age. Then what are you afraid of? Dare to compete? Of course. Bring it on. The two old men refused to yield an inch. Watching them argue, Rhodes turned to Bob and asked, President Bob, if they end up drunk and fighting, is there anything you can do to stop them? Bob smiled warmly. Oh, they've always been like this. Instead of answering Rhodes' question, he asked in return. When you fight in the guild, who usually stops you? Rhodes paused. Well, most of the time, nobody. Everyone just watches and cheers. Only Riza would step in when things get really out of hand. If it escalated to the point of damaging the building, then Master Mikarev would intervene himself. Bob chuckled. No worries. We're all getting older. We prefer settling things without throwing punches these days. Without fighting? How? Rhodes was a bit curious, but also a little wary. Wait, you're telling me they still have to settle it somehow even after arguing? Probably. Bob said cheerfully. They'll likely have the younger generation settle it for them. He smiled at Rhodes and added. Maybe you'll represent Fairy Tale and challenge the young talents from the Quattro Cerberus. Rhodes thought about the S-class wizard Goldmine had just boasted about and felt his scalp tingle. Forgive me, but I really can't take on an S-class wizard right now. Bob encouraged him brightly. Young people should be a little more confident. You're from Fairy Tale, after all. Rhodes could only offer a bitter smile. Why do I feel like you understand Fairy Tale even better than I do? After all, just last month, he had been flattened by an S-class wizard. Facing another one was really not something he was eager to experience again. Chapter 197, Makarov, apology expert. That night, Rhodes carried Makarov back to his room. The old man was reeking of alcohol, still muttering things like, I won't lose to you and Fairy Tale is the best. Maybe it was because Myra usually kept a close eye on him back at the guild, but once away from home, Makarov had no restraint and honestly, he wasn't great at controlling himself even when she was around. Rhodes carefully helped the master take off his shoes and coat, tucked him into bed, and placed a glass of water on the bedside table before quietly turning off the lights and leaving the room. He wasn't ready to go to sleep just yet. Returning to his own room, Rhodes practiced his requip magic for a while. After returning from their last mission, he had been steadily training in it back at home. This magic was really fascinating. Once mastered, it opened a personal pocket space where you could store clothes, weapons, or basically anything you could hold in your hand, even something like a rock. However, the size of the requip space depended on the user's innate talent and hard work. Take Ursa, for example. She could store dozens of armors and hundreds of weapons. Visca could carry hundreds of magic guns, plus a wardrobe full of outfits. As for Rhodes, he currently had just enough space for a single wardrobe. Not bad for a beginner. His talent wasn't incredible, but it was respectable. If he really wanted to, he could probably switch paths and become a magic swordsman. With his close combat skills, he could easily become a core member in a normal guild. But Rhodes had no such plans. A wardrobe's worth of space was enough for him. He just wanted to store some clothes and daily essentials, so he could travel light in the future without lugging around a giant suitcase. Re-equip. Rhodes commanded. A soft glow surrounded him, and with a poof, his daytime clothes vanished, only for a set of pajamas to fall right onto his head. Yeah, the quick change function clearly wasn't ready for public use yet. Unfazed, Rhodes calmly picked up his pajamas, took a nice hot shower, and changed like nothing had happened. After a bit of meditation, he drifted off into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, the second day of the regular meeting began early. Rhodes had just returned from morning training when Makarov dragged him straight into the conference hall. The meeting was once again chaired by President Goldmine. The first topic on the agenda was about the Magic Council. Not about fighting against them, rather, about how guilds should cooperate with them. Although a lot of Fairy Tale wizards viewed the council like some big, bad watchdog, for most people, The council was simply an institution responsible for maintaining order in the magic world and punishing those who abused magic. Over the years, the council had relentlessly cracked down on dark guilds and criminal mages. Despite occasional flaws, they'd made huge contributions to the stability of the continent. Sure, sometimes they slipped up, Fiore being a remote kingdom didn't help, but overall, cooperating with the council was vital for keeping the magic world and the kingdom safe. When the topic of working with the council came up, Makarov immediately perked up. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, waiting smugly for Goldmine to praise him by name. Goldmine glanced over, but instead of mentioning Makarov, he said, "Here we should recognize Fairy Tale's S-class wizard, Mirza Scarlet. She's completed countless difficult assignments for the council. Although she sometimes causes a bit of collateral damage, overall, her contributions have been outstanding." Makarov's face first fell, then quickly brightened again. "It doesn't matter," he thought proudly. "Mirza's one of ours too. Praising her is praising Fairy Tale." Even during official meetings, the two old men couldn't help but spar with each other in their own way. In the afternoon, the topic shifted from the council to the growing threat of dark guilds. "Speaking of dark guilds," Goldmine said seriously, "we have to mention the Bullum Alliance." The moment the name was spoken, the entire hall fell silent. For every guild, the Bullum Alliance was a terrifying dark force. The three major dark guilds that formed the alliance, Tartros, Grimoire Ironheart, and Orachin Cease, controlled more than 90% of the dark guilds across the continent. They were universally recognized as a power that no regular guild could fight against alone. Among the three, Goldman explained gravely, Tartros remains as mysterious as ever. No one knows where their base is hidden. Grimoire Ironheart occasionally shows signs of movement, but there's no clear pattern. Only Orachin Cease has been getting more active lately. Rhodes thought back to the Naked Bandage Men guild he and Gray had taken down together. They seem to be affiliated with Orachin Cease. Goldmine continued seriously. It's not just the main forces of Orachin Cease. The dark guilds under their control have also been unusually active. I suspect they're planning something. Everyone, stay alert. President Bob added. Just recently, Ren from our Blue Pegasus encountered members of Iron Forest while out on a job. They seemed to be searching for something, but unfortunately, they escaped. Other guild leaders also chimed in, sharing bits and pieces of intelligence. Names like Corpse Soul and Red Hood were mentioned among the dark guilds that had been cited. Mikro fell into deep thought. In the past, these dark guilds mostly worked in the shadows, taking on illegal jobs like kidnapping, extortion, and assassination. When desperate for money, they might commit theft, but they usually tried to keep a low profile. Now, however, their sudden boldness was concerning. Some of the smaller guild masters at the meeting expressed their unease. Their guilds were relatively small, and some had no more than 20 members. In terms of strength, many of these smaller guilds were made up of wizards who specialized in helping ordinary people with everyday troubles. Combat was never their focus. To put it bluntly, Rhodes realized that many of these small guilds were at a level he could probably handle alone. Some were so far behind that even if they attempted Fairy Tale's S-class wizard promotion trial, they wouldn't stand a chance of qualifying. In gaming terms, if Fairy Tale members were mostly combat specialists, these guilds were made up of life skill players. Still, within the local guild alliance, there was no division between strong and weak. Unless there were personal grudges, the guilds genuinely looked out for each other. Makarov, Bob, Goldmine, and other presidents of larger guilds immediately reassured everyone that if the smaller guilds ever needed help, they could reach out without hesitation. One of the guild masters stood up and marked all the areas where sightings of dark guilds had been reported on a map. Using magic, he quickly duplicated dozens of copies and handed them out to the other presidents. Rhodes couldn't help but marvel at how strange magic was in this world. There were even human-shaped printers. After that, the discussion shifted to what actions ordinary wizards should take when encountering dark guilds. Everyone worked together to summarize guidelines that they could bring back and share with their own guild members. The meetings over the first 2 days went smoothly. However, on the third day, things got a little heated. That day's theme was conflict mediation between guilds. All the conflicts that had piled up over the past year were brought out into the open for everyone to judge and resolve. Although fighting between wizard guilds was strictly forbidden, minor skirmishes and personal disputes were inevitable. Since most of these weren't serious enough to involve the Magic Council, they were handled here instead. It was often said that this part of the meeting was Makarov's home turf. Rhodes thought he already understood how troublesome his guildmates could be, but he realized he had still underestimated them. Out of the 30 guild masters present, at least half had something to say about Fairy Tale. Most complaints were about damages caused by Fairy Tale wizards during their battles. Some accused Fairy Tale members of flirting with girls from their guilds and creating messy relationships. One even complained about waking up from a nap, only to see a naked man strolling casually past their window, way too much of a shock to handle. As the master of Fairy Tale and one of the 10 wizard saints of Ishkar, Makarov didn't get angry or try to use his authority to silence the complaints. Instead, he apologized with genuine sincerity, and such practiced ease that Rhodes felt a little sorry for him. What exactly had the master gone through all these years to become so skilled at apologizing? It was thanks to Makarov setting such a good example early on that the rest of the guild masters followed suit. Whenever someone raised a complaint, the guild in question would explain, and once judgment was made, they would offer a formal apology and compensation. Because of this, the alliance maintained good unity and didn't fall apart over minor disputes. After settling all the previous issues, the meeting finally moved on to the last item on the agenda, the part Makarov hated the most. Drawing lots to assign tasks. Makarov was notoriously unlucky at these draws. He was the kind of person who always ended up pulling the worst assignments. Chapter 198, I'm back. There were generally 2 sources for the randomly assigned tasks at the regular meetings. One source was the Magic Council, which often needed to request assistance from guilds to make up for a lack of manpower or certain specialized skills. Rhodes had already experienced this kind of task once. They were usually troublesome, with only average rewards, but the advantage was gaining favor with the council. For Fairy Tale, this was quite helpful. At the very least, it allowed Mr. Yajima to speak more confidently on Fairy Tale's behalf during council sessions. The other source was the smaller guilds. Occasionally, small guilds would receive commissions beyond their abilities. Some would reject the jobs outright and help redirect the clients to bigger guilds. Others would attempt the task, and only after failing, pass it along to stronger guilds. The regular meeting served as a convenient place to hand off these commissions. Naturally, the guild masters allowed to participate in the draw were those recognized as capable enough to handle them, guilds like Blue Pegasus and Quattro Cerberus. And, of course, Fairy Tale, as one of Fiore's top guilds, had its responsibilities too. Makarov hopped down from his chair, took a few steps forward, and suddenly turned back. Rhodes, you go for me. Me? Rhodes blinked. Go on. My luck's terrible. Makarov sighed. No matter how similar the difficulty of the tasks was, he somehow always ended up pulling the lowest paying ones. And every time he returned to the guild, the kids would tease him for never once drawing a good lot. This time, Makarov wanted to confirm whether it was truly his bad luck, or if certain mischievous individuals like Goldmine were playing tricks on him. Rhodes had no choice but to step forward to draw. The lot holder was a simple wooden box filled with bamboo sticks, looking very handmade, with no traces of magic. Rhodes didn't intend to cheat. He simply reached in and drew one at random. Good one. Rhodes. You're too reliable. Makarov shouted joyfully, nearly dancing with excitement. At long last, he could see what a best lot looked like. Rhodes scratched his head, confused. Wait, I thought people were just joking when they said you drew bad lots. They actually write good and bad on the sticks? Yep. Goldmine laughed without mercy. When we first came up with this system, Makarov thought it'd be funnier to label tasks of equal difficulty but different rewards with good and bad. And ever since then, he's always pulled bad. But I just drew a good one. Makarov was practically glowing with happiness. Then he quickly grew aggrieved again. Why was it that Rhodes managed to draw a good lot immediately? Was his luck truly that bad? With the lottery completed, the regular meeting came to a successfully close. That evening, a banquet was held as usual. Makarov eagerly went off to drink and chat with his old friends, pushing Rhodes to go socialize on his own and make some connections. Rhodes suspected that the real reason was so no one would nag the master about drinking too much. Still, since the master insisted, he wandered casually around the banquet hall. After spending 3 days locked in the conference hall, seeing some familiar faces now didn't seem so bad. One of the guild masters had brought along a beautiful young wizard. She shyly told Rhodes that she admired Myra and asked if she could get an autograph. Rhodes thought about it and vaguely remembered seeing her in an issue of Sorcerer Weekly, but he couldn't recall much else. He also didn't remember Myra being the type to hand out autographs, so he simply gave a perfunctory reply, saying he'd ask Myra about it when he got back. Anyway, Rhodes didn't plan on attending the next regular meeting if he could help it. Rhodes couldn't help but feel that the master had shoved all the trouble onto him. From now on, when the next regular meeting rolled around, he figured he'd just grab a mission and make himself scarce. That night, Rhodes once again had to take care of the drunken old man. The next morning, the presidents said their goodbyes and left one after another. Naturally, Rhodes boarded the train home with Makarov. As soon as they were out of sight of the other guild masters, Makarov casually revealed his magic, changing out of the formal Saint Wizard cloak into a cozy winter coat with a flick of his hand. Watching the smooth, enviably fast transformation, Rhodes said eagerly, "Master, Teach me how to do that. Although Mikrev might not match Urza in terms of requip magic, what he demonstrated was much more practical and suited for someone like Rhodes. After all, being good at something didn't necessarily mean you could teach it well. Welcome back, Master Rhodes. You two must have had a tough trip. Myra greeted them warmly with a smile. If you ignored the battered tavern and the group of people sprawled unconscious on the floor, it was honestly a heartwarming sight. Mikrev sighed. You're the one who's worked hard, staying back to take care of the guild. Is Urza around? Seeing that the master clearly had something else to say, Rhodes stayed silent and simply winked at Myra from behind Mikrev. Myra smiled back but didn't respond. Instead, she answered the master's question. Urza's gone to Heart Cruise again. She said she wants to make some adjustments to her armor designs. She should be back later today. Humphrey. These few days. Never mind. Mikrev grumbled. When Urza comes back, bring her and Rhodes to see me. He had wanted to ask if anyone had caused trouble while they were gone, but after 3 days of constant apologizing at the meeting, he decided it could wait another day. No way, Master. Why am I getting dragged into this? I just got back. Because you drew the lot. Mikrev said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, and if you and Urza team up, we're definitely going to beat that guy Goldmine. That was just a drunken joke, wasn't it? Why are you taking it seriously? Mikrev wiped the sweat from his forehead and hurriedly started up the stairs. I wasn't drunk. I only had a little wine. That was a sober, serious decision. We have to show them how strong Fairy Tail is. Our Fairy Tail is the best guild in Fiore. Myra's smile turned sweet but sharp. Master, didn't we agree to watch our drinking? What's this about drinking too much? And competitions? Realizing he had dug himself into a hole, Mikrev fled upstairs in a panic, tossing the blame over his shoulder. Ask Rhodes. I'll explain everything when Urza gets back. Rhodes sighed. He glanced at Myra and thought to himself, well, it's not much of a punishment if it's her asking. Myra tilted her head, looking confused. What exactly happened? 2 old kids got into an argument, and now they're dragging us into a competition to prove whose child is better. Rhodes explained the entire story, recounting the events of the past few days, including how the master talked in his sleep during the meeting and how he had to cover for him. Myra chuckled as she listened, especially when Rhodes described how Mikrev blurted out nonsense in his dreams and Rhodes had to smooth things over. Oh, right. Rhodes suddenly looked at her, smiled, and said, I'm back. Welcome back. Myra replied without thinking. Then she blinked and asked, didn't I already say that once? Rhodes simply smiled without answering. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small package, the snacks he had brought back for her. Myra's eyes softened. She hesitated for a moment, then lightly punched Rhodes on the arm. Chapter 199, Until we meet again, that's the situation. Mikrev said. So I'd like you and Rhodes to tackle this mission together. No problem, Master. We won't let the guild down. Urza replied immediately, as expected. After all, anything that involved the guild's reputation was something Urza took very seriously. In truth, Rhodes suspected this was less about the guild's honor and more about letting Mikrev show off to Goldmine at the next regular meeting. Still, as someone willing to share the master's burdens and bring honor to Fairy Tail, Rhodes didn't refuse. Besides, there was another, slightly less noble reason. When he drew the lot, he'd caught a glimpse of the mission's reward, 2 million jewel, split between 2 people. 1 million jewel each for a non-S-class mission while teaming up with an S-class wizard. Plus, he could add another piece toward his dream of buying property in Magnolia. Worth it. After some quick discussion, they decided to set out the next morning. Urza needed to check if her armor modifications were ready, and if not, she would have to collect them early. Rhodes, on the other hand, needed to do some research. The mission location this time was at the border between the Kingdom of Fiore, the Kingdom of Bosco and the Kingdom of Seven. Rhodes spent over an hour buried in the guild's library, flipping through books. Just as he was getting into it, Myra came over, calling him for lunch. Rhodes frowned slightly. Now that he had a little more money, he really needed to find time to buy a pair of enchanted glasses. He couldn't keep borrowing levies every time he needed to read. Myra asked gently. Is the mission giving you a headache? It's not too bad. Rhodes said, closing the book. The danger level doesn't seem too high. It's more of an intelligence-gathering mission. But wasn't there already a team that got injured while investigating? Myra reminded him. Yeah, a 3-person team from Poison Fang Guild. But don't worry, they were only injured, not killed. Despite the name sounding like a dark guild, Poison Fang was a legitimate guild. As for their strength, well, if they were really that strong, they wouldn't have abandoned such a high-paying mission. Since their team only suffered injuries and no casualties, and since Rhodes would be teaming up with Urza, he wasn't too worried. Just then, a small hand waved between their faces. Lockie leaned in, grinning. "The food's getting cold. Are you planning to chat all day?" Rhodes glanced at her, picking up his bowl. "You're out of dessert, you know." Today's treat was a premium dessert prepared by the guild master of God of Cooking's knife, the one famous for his cooking skills. Lockie wasn't intimidated in the slightest. Hee, I'll just ask Sister Myra for some later." Myra smiled sweetly at her. Well, there might not be any left. Sister Myra. After lunch, Rhodes went back to reading. When Rizza returned to the guild, he invited her to a sparring match in the backyard, with one condition: Rizza was only allowed to defend. The main goal was to familiarize himself with her fighting habits. After all, there was always a chance they might have to coordinate closely in battle during the mission. Rhodes quickly realized it had been a while since he'd fought anyone seriously. It felt surprisingly refreshing to move like this again. Maybe because Rizza wasn't fighting back. The rest of his time was spent digging through piles of books, searching for any useful information about the mission site. Later, while he was stacking another mountain of books onto the library table, Myra walked over and handed him a small, delicate box. "This is for you," she said warmly. Rhodes blinked in surprise. A gift? What's the occasion?" He opened it, and immediately recognized what was inside. "Wait, these are enchanted glasses? I saw them on my way to order wine." Myra explained with a soft smile. "I thought you might need them." It reminded Rhodes of the time she randomly bought him something during their trip to the capital. He opened his mouth to ask why she hadn't simply invited him along to buy them, but wisely swallowed the question. Instead, he grinned brightly and said, "Thanks a lot." Right then, hugging her would have been the most natural thing to do. Unfortunately, Myra seemed perfectly satisfied just seeing how happy he was. She gave him a little wave and said, "All right, I'll get back to work. You do your best too." Rhodes's reading speed skyrocketed. His heart felt lighter, and his mood was soaring. Thanks to that boost, he made huge progress in the afternoon. Later that evening, Rhodes trained lightly with Myra and Elfman, careful not to overexert himself before the mission. Seeing him pushing himself, Myra gently reminded him, "You should head back early and get some rest. Here's your key." "No need," Rhodes said easily. "I have a spare." Myra froze for a moment. Did he have to leave a spare key with her too? Still, arguing would only encourage him to find even more outrageous excuses. She sighed lightly and said, "Fine. Just be careful this time." Rhodes smiled shamelessly. "I'm counting on you to watch the house again while I'm away." "Manly," Elfman roared, slamming his fist into his palm. "Let's have another manly fight before you go." When Rhodes finally made it home, he was still rubbing his sore arm, thinking how much Elfman had improved lately. As someone who may have certain thoughts about Elfman's sister, Rhodes felt an increasing amount of pressure. He pulled out his key, unlocked the door, and turned on the light. The moment he stepped inside, he almost didn't recognize the place. The bed was neatly made. The training equipment was carefully sorted and pushed into a corner. The magazines and stationery on the desk were neatly stacked away, though the book he had left upside down on the table remained untouched. The 3 potted plants had been moved inside, still thriving vibrantly. The framed photo of the guildmates on the wall, along with a handful of paintings gifted by Ritas, had all been carefully dusted until spotless. Normally, Rhodes kept the house clean enough, but it was always a little messy. He had never organized it this meticulously before. It wasn't hard to guess who had done all this. Rhodes stood at the doorway for a long time, just silently taking it all in. Finally, he clenched his fist lightly and cheered himself up under his breath. "All right. Let's do this." The next morning, Rhodes headed to the guild to meet up with Ursa, and to say goodbye to Myra. For some reason, leaving felt harder than usual. The moment he stepped out of the guild doors, he was already looking forward to the day he'd come back. As always, Ursa was dragging a luggage cart loaded with bags. Her equipped space was packed to the brim with clothes, armors, and weapons. Anything she didn't use often had to be stored back at the dormitory. By comparison, Rhodes, a beginner at equip magic, traveled light. He only carried a single bag stuffed with books and materials to read on the road. This time, instead of rushing to rent a carriage, they needed to take a train first, crossing the Croba Grand Canyon to reach the last station, and then figure out how to get to the mission site. Since it was a border area, things might not be as orderly as within Fiori itself. There might not even be any coachmen willing to head that way. If it came to that, they'd have to rely on the hard-working scuttle crabs again. Dragging his bag along, Rhodes muttered, "Wow. Carrying all this luggage onto the train only costs an extra ticket. This station's policies are really generous." "Of course," Mirza replied matter-of-factly. "I mean," Rhodes continued, If someone wanted to exploit this system, like mass purchasing or smuggling goods, the profit could be huge, right? Rosa shook her head firmly. No. We're wizards. It's normal for us to carry extra luggage for missions. But if it's commercial goods, the station has separate rules for merchants. They won't let people take advantage of loopholes like that. Rhodes thought to himself that this world's systems really were idealistic, and surprisingly humane. Chapter 200, Cursed Sword. The situation is simple. Rhodes said. Our mission is to find a sword and either retrieve it or destroy it. To be more precise. Rosa added. It's a cursed sword. And the Quattro Cerberus Guild will also be sending an S-class wizard and an assistant to compete with us. If they reach the sword first, not only will our trip be wasted, but it'll also embarrass Master Makarov. As the train rumbled along, Rosa and Rhodes sat facing each other, quietly discussing the mission details. Because their respective guild masters had gotten into a childish argument during the last regular meeting, they'd come up with the idea of this little competition. Goldmine had initially proposed that their young S-class mages compete against each other. But Makarov, ever the sly fox, suggested they add a lower-ranked assistant into the mix to test teamwork as well. Thus, the mission Rogue had drawn by lot was chosen for the contest. Whoever completed it first would win everything, the spoils, the bragging rights, and the guild's honor. At the next regular meeting, the loser would even have to pour drinks for the winner. Still, since two S-class wizards were involved in a mission that technically didn't even qualify as S-class, both guild masters weren't too worried about anyone getting hurt. They trusted their wizards. Even if things got competitive, no one would ever act recklessly enough to risk the other's life. Our destination is an ancient battlefield. Rhodes continued. It's the site of a bloody war fought before the kingdom of Fiore declared permanent neutrality. The cursed sword we're after may have either been born from that conflict, or forged for it. Mirza thought for a moment. It's been over 160 years since Fiore became neutral, right? Exactly. Rhodes said. 162 years, to be precise, since it was officially recognized by the surrounding kingdoms. The initial announcement might have been a little earlier. In this world, wars between kingdoms typically started with common soldiers clashing. But if the fighting dragged on without a clear winner, eventually the kingdoms would hire wizards to intervene. Once magic got involved, wars would escalate fast. A single outstanding wizard, or a powerful magical artifact could turn the tide of an entire battlefield. The cursed sword they were searching for was rumored to be exactly that kind of artifact. Legend said that whoever wielded it could resist an army of thousands. Those slain by its blade would have their souls trapped in endless torment, and even the living struck by it would suffer unbearable pain. Lately, there had been multiple reports from villages near the battlefield of hunters getting attacked. They survived, but their wounds were strange, refusing to heal until a mage skilled in curse removal treated them. The hunters described being attacked by what they called the resurrected dead. Furious at them for trespassing on their territory. Fear quickly spread across the villages. They banded together to seek help from the wizard guilds. Poison Fang Guild, despite their somewhat dark-sounding name, was a regular legal guild. They had dispatched a 3-person team to investigate. Unfortunately, all 3 had been injured. According to their report, after entering the battlefield, a thick mist had risen around them. Then, attacks came from every direction. They couldn't even tell who or what they were fighting. Based on everything we know, Rhodes said thoughtfully, I'm guessing someone found the sword and is using it for power. They're probably trying to scare people away by faking undead attacks. It was the most logical explanation. But Urza, arms folded and expression serious, offered a different opinion. Or maybe the undead really have returned, and they just want to protect their resting place. Undead resurrection? Rhodes didn't completely dismiss the idea. In this world, feudal superstitions often turned out to have a grain of truth. After all, ghosts, spirits, and soul-based magic were real phenomena here. So it wouldn't be surprising if a few powerful undead lingered in the ruins of an ancient battlefield, especially one where wizards had once fought. There was no need to panic when encountering the undead. The standard procedure was to fight them as you would any other opponent. If they were special types that couldn't be harmed by normal attacks, it usually meant there was some kind of vessel anchoring them to the world. Destroying the vessel would dispel them. This was basic common sense among wizards. The journey went smoothly. Urza had prepared plenty of food for the trip, and Rhodes happily ate and drank alongside her without needing to worry about anything. By the time they reached the village that had requested help, it was already around 3 in the afternoon. Following the directions they'd received, Rhodes and Urza quickly found the village chief's house. Rhodes stepped forward politely. Hello, we're wizards from Fairy Tale. We're here to handle your request. The village chief looked at them in confusion. Wizards? But someone from Quattro Cerberus already came this morning. He said he was here for the same commission. Rhodes and Urza exchanged a glance. As expected, the other team had moved fast. The village was indeed closer to Quattro Cerberus's territory. Seeing the chief's doubts, Rhodes patiently explained, "Your commission is a special case. Both of our guilds have sent wizards this time. We came fully prepared and determined to resolve the problem. Could you please explain the situation to us in detail?" "Of course." The village chief clearly didn't mind more help. After all, they only had to pay one reward. The more skilled wizards they had, the better. And compared to the two people who came earlier, Rhodes and Urza looked much more serious, and far more reliable. The chief quickly began explaining, "It all started about half a month ago. Before that, there were no strange happenings. But then, anyone who went near the old battlefield was attacked. There were 5 people injured in our village alone," the village chief said gravely. "And even more in the neighboring villages." He paused, then added, "When I was a child, I heard my grandfather tell a story, one he said was passed down from his own grandfather, about the war that once raged there. Back then, there was a brutal general from the Kingdom of Seven. To raise military rations, he slaughtered countless innocent civilians, spreading terror throughout the surrounding region. But because he was unmatched on the battlefield, able to rally troops by cutting down hundreds on his own, the king never punished him." The village chief's voice lowered, as if reciting an old legend. "Some people said the general's incredible power came from a sword. But the longer he wielded it, the more violent and unstable he became. Eventually, he wasn't just killing civilians. Even his own soldiers would be executed if they dared to speak out against him. As resentment within the army grew, his subordinates finally turned on him during a battle. Others say they revolted not to stop his madness, but to seize the cursed sword for themselves." The chief sighed heavily. Whatever the truth, after that day, the sword was said to have absorbed all that hatred and bloodshed, becoming a cursed object. Anyone who wields it turns into a monster who knows nothing but slaughter. And if the sword were to fall into the hands of the undead god, it would be even more terrifying. Urza leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. "Has anyone actually seen these undead?" The village chief shook his head. "No one has seen them clearly. Every time someone is attacked, they say a thick mist rolls in, and then they're struck down. So people believe it must be the undead." Rhodes asked carefully about the locations where the attacks had happened, as well as the injuries the hunters had suffered. Finally, he asked about the 2 wizards from Quattro Cerberus. "The first one," the chief said tactfully, "was, well, he smelled of alcohol. And the other, his clothing and manners weren't exactly what you'd expect from a professional." In truth, the chief wanted to say the second man looked more like a delinquent than a wizard, but out of respect, he chose his words carefully. Urza thought for a moment, then said firmly, "The drunk one is probably Bacchus Grow, an S-class wizard from Quattro Cerberus." Chapter 201, Smuggling Across Borders. "Do you know him?" Rhodes asked. "We crossed paths during 2 different missions," Urza recalled. "Neither of us came out on top. He's a formidable opponent, definitely worthy of the S-class title." "What kind of magic does he use?" Rhodes asked. He honestly couldn't remember any relevant information. "It's a magic style that concentrates magical power into the palms, greatly enhancing strength and destructive force," Urza explained. "Isn't that just how everyone fights normally?" Rhodes asked, a little puzzled. Urza nodded. "Exactly. It's one of the most basic ways of using magic power, so most wizards know a bit of it. But Bacchus seems to have an extraordinary talent for it. He's mastered how to bring out its full potential. If he gets serious, I'm not even sure if my adamantine armor could withstand a direct hit from his palm strikes." After gathering all the necessary information, they left the village chief's house. As they exchanged notes, they rode a scuttle crab toward the ancient battlefield. Listening to Urza describe Bacchus's strength, Rhodes was a little tempted by the idea of learning that style, but only a little. His training schedule was already packed tight. He could always study the combat characteristics and force application techniques of different martial arts when he had spare time, but there was no urgent need to train in it seriously. Bacchus's power wasn't because of palm magic itself, but because it suited him perfectly. Just like magic, martial arts weren't particularly secretive. If becoming S-class were as simple as mastering one fighting style, Quattro Cerberus would have been the #1 guild already. The scuttle crab steadily carried them eastward, climbing rugged paths as the scenery gradually opened up before them. Wild grass stretched endlessly, patches of unmelted snow clung stubbornly to the earth, and in the distance, the desolate ruins of an ancient battlefield slowly came into view. The sight wasn't quite what Rhodes had imagined. He had expected devastation, heaps of bones, broken weapons scattered everywhere, dried blood staining the ground. Instead, time had smoothed it all away. 2 centuries had buried the scars under fields of wild grass and frost. Only when Rhodes and Reza moved deeper into the battlefield did they occasionally spot fragments of tiny bones, rusted arrowheads, battered helmets, and scraps of rotted leather armor. Reza crouched down and picked up a spear. The wooden shaft had long since rotted away. The heavily corroded spearhead crumbled in her hands the moment she lifted it. She dropped the rotten wood and scanned their surroundings. "This must be the edge of the battlefield," she said. "The real fighting probably happened deeper in. I'll send out the merc wolves and raptors to scout ahead," Rhodes said. "Even if we can't find the sword right away, at least we can locate the others." He summoned 6 wolves and a flock of 12 sharp-eyed raptors. The creatures scattered into the wilderness, each taking a different direction. As Reza moved to inspect some of the scattered weapons, Rhodes quickly warned her. "It's probably not a good idea to touch anything in a place that might be cursed. I'm just curious about the design of ancient weapons," Reza said calmly. "But you're right. Better safe than sorry." In a flash of light, she summoned a spear of purging evil, holding it expertly in her hands. Using the tip of the spear, she lightly poked at the objects on the ground instead. The spear of purging evil had special properties that countered dark, ghostly, and curse-based magic. Last time, it had been instrumental in destroying the altar of the dark magic cult. Rhodes watched Reza poking around the battlefield like a curious kitten, and quietly kept a 2-meter distance from her. After thinking for a moment, he released a group of Krugs underground, directing them to follow along beneath Reza's feet. Rhodes silently prayed he wouldn't have to use them. The ancient battlefield wasn't some flat, open plain like he had imagined. Instead, it was a gently rolling landscape, with small hills and slopes scattered throughout. Rhodes and Reza moved forward cautiously, gradually making their way deeper into the heart of the battlefield. The further they went, the more signs of death and battle they found: scattered bones, rusted weapons, tattered horse harnesses, and even fragments of rotted chariots. Here and there, they also came across worn stone markers engraved with the words Boundary Monument. Without realizing it, the red sun had dipped low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the ruins. They had already crossed into the borderlands. Rhodes asked a legal question that had been bothering him. "Hey, what's the process if you want to go abroad?" "Going abroad?" Reza said casually as she stepped over a boundary marker. "You just do this." "No, I mean," Rhodes pressed. "Don't you need a passport or official documents or something?" "There's no such thing," Reza replied, pointing to the spot where her fairy tale emblem was hidden under her thick winter clothes. "We have this." Just like Myra had explained when she stamped his guild mark, the emblem of fairy tale served as an official identification for wizards, recognized across borders. "It's really convenient," Rhodes said, stepping forward to follow her across the line. And just like that, Rhodes had left Fiore. He couldn't help but think that, in his previous world, this would definitely have counted as smuggling. "Wait." Rhodes suddenly stopped. "One of the merc wolves I sent out just got killed." Reza immediately halted her search, switching into a defensive stance. "What happened?" "I'm not sure yet," Rhodes said, frowning. Apart from the scuttle crab, most of his summoned creatures weren't particularly good at exploration. If an enemy moved fast enough, he wouldn't even know what happened until his summons refreshed the next day. Fortunately, a raptor managed to return on its own not long after. Rhodes quickly summoned it, asking it to lead the way to where the attack had happened. At the same time, he asked it a few key questions: whether the creature it encountered was human or ghost, and whether it had been one enemy or two. The little raptor nodded and then shook its head, letting Rhodes know that the 2 people it encountered were indeed the wizards from Quattro Cerberus. After a brief discussion, Rhodes and Reza decided to go meet them. After all, they would have to cross paths sooner or later. It would be better to understand how far along the other team was. Following the raptor, they walked for some distance and crossed over another boundary marker. This time, they crossed from the kingdom of Bosco into the kingdom of Seven. At this point, Rhodes thought to himself, "Now I'm officially someone who's traveled across multiple countries." Underneath a barren cliff, the 2 Quattro Cerberus wizards were waiting. One of them lay sprawled lazily on the ground, wearing purple arm guards. His black hair was tied into a messy top knot, and he leaned casually on one arm while swigging from a wine gourd with the other. The second one had wild yellow hair styled into 2 fluffy tufts that looked like hound ears. He wore a black leather jacket and stood a little nervously to the side, clearly uneasy. "Are you sure this is okay, Bacchus?" the younger one asked. "We got here before them, so shouldn't we hurry up and look for the sword?" "Relax," said Bacchus, sounding half drunk but still sharp. "You saw how that wolf disappeared earlier, right? It was clearly under someone's control." He raised the wine gourd again and took a long swig before continuing. "No matter which way we go, we'll just be tracked. And judging by that magic, they have the advantage when it comes to scouting." "So what do we do?" his companion asked hesitantly. Bacchus grinned lazily. Simple. The old man just wants us to settle the score with Fairy Tale, right? Then we don't need to wait around. We just beat them now. Beat them? But, Bacchus, they've got an S-class wizard too. It's not going to be easy to win in a head-on fight. No buts. Bacchus sparked, clearly annoyed at his companion's lack of spirit. We're wizards of Quattro Cerberus, remember? Winners don't hesitate. He suddenly threw out his arm dramatically and roared. Wild. The younger one jumped in hurriedly. 4. Bacchus, still dissatisfied with the energy, shouted again, louder this time. Wild. And Rocker answered, nearly tripping over his own feet in panic. 4. Chapter 202, Don't blame us for outnumbering you. The Quattro Cerberus Guild chant seemed to have some strange magic to it. After they shouted it out loud, Rocker suddenly felt brimming with confidence. He truly believed they would win. After all, Bacchus was incredibly strong. Surely he could defeat even Fairy Tale's S-class wizard without a problem. And as for himself? He would definitely not disappoint Bacchus. He'd show Fairy Tale just how powerful his rock drill punch was. There you are. Bacchus said, respectfully sitting cross-legged and setting aside his wine gourd. His gaze focused on Urza. Fairy Queen, huh? Fairy Queen? Rocker's confidence wavered immediately, his nerves returning in full force. Rhodes and Urza dismounted from their scuttle crab and calmly walked toward the two Quattro Cerberus wizards. Rhodes caught the little yellow-haired guy's reaction and couldn't help but feel a little envious of Urza's reputation. It must be really nice, having your enemies shrink back the moment they saw you. Long time no see, Bacchus. Urza said sternly. It doesn't seem like you've improved much. No worries. I'm about to show you how much I've grown. Bacchus replied, taking a long swig from his wine gourd. He jumped to his feet, taking a loose, drunken stance. I'll defeat you right here, and you'll have no choice but to give up the mission. Is he seriously planning to fight while drunk? Rhodes thought, stepping forward. I object. If we start fighting now, what happens if we run into the real enemy later? Urza added calmly. Yes. Our suggestion is that we complete the mission first. If you still want to settle things after, we can fight then. Rocker hesitated. Bacchus. Maybe they have a point. Quit whining. Bacchus sparked, clearly tipsy now. If we wipe them out quick and clean, there won't be any problems. He took a few more gulps, his face reddening. What's the matter? Hick. Are you scared? It was a terribly childish provocation, but Urza just shook her head gently. Looks like you're not willing to listen. This wasn't unexpected. Rhodes and Urza had already prepared for this possibility. If words failed, they would simply have to settle things with action. Still, out of respect for the friendly relationship between their guild masters, Rhodes offered a final warning. Remember, this is a team competition. Rhodes said lightly. If you insist on fighting now, don't blame us for ganging up on you. Rocker puffed up, offended. Who are you calling weak? We've got 2 people too. No, I mean. Rhodes smiled, raising a hand. We have more than just 2 people. At his signal, the ground trembled faintly. A scuttle crab, 2 grumps, 5 merc wolves, and a dozen sharp-eyed raptors crept out from behind the cliffs, surrounding the battlefield. Even Worm wandered over, as if wanting to join in. It's 24 against 2 now. I still suggest we finish the mission first. Otherwise, I can have all my summons lend a hand. The sight of the assorted beasts gathering together was enough to make anyone hesitate. The giant twin-headed wolf, the towering toads, they didn't look easy to deal with. Rocker gulped. Bacchus, I think this guy's the summoner master warned us about. Bacchus simply laughed and wiped his mouth. Ha ha ha. So what if there's more of them? He shifted his stance and charged straight at Rhodes without hesitation. It's just a summoner. Knock him out, and everything falls apart. Rhodes's face darkened. Intimidation doesn't work on drunkards. With a silent thought, a krug surged from the ground, sinking Rhodes into the earth safely. Requip. Heaven's Wheel Armor, Sword Storm. Urza called, stepping forward to shield Rhodes. In a brilliant flash, she switched armors. Blades shimmered into existence around her and, with a flick of her hand, dozens of flying swords launched toward Bacchus in tightly coordinated waves. Underground, using the perspective of the scuttle crab, Rhodes watched the battle unfold. Bacchus staggered and weaved, drunkenly but skillfully, dodging one sword after another. His movements seemed uncoordinated at first glance, but they were anything but random. His body twisted and swayed, his steps erratic. Sometimes, he would simply flop onto his back, roll over, and spring upright again. When he encountered something difficult to dodge, he would strike it with a palm strike, either knocking the sword away or outright shattering it. This really does look like a mix between Drunken Fist and Sleeping Arhit Fist. Rhodes observed from a distance. And he broke one of Ursa's Heaven's Wheel swords with a single slap. That power isn't something to take lightly. Rhodes emerged from underground a short distance away from Ursa and Bacchus's battlefield. Meanwhile, his shadow wolves had already surrounded Rocker. The yellow-haired wizard with the wild, hound-ear hairstyle was surprisingly strong. His magic allowed his limbs and body to rotate at high speed like a drill, greatly amplifying the force of his attacks. Even with 5 wolves surrounding him, Rocker wasn't going down easily. In fact, he had already knocked 2 of them aside. Alright, time to end this cleanly. Rhodes decided. Summon. Blue Sentinel. A powerful light flashed as the massive Blue Sentinel materialized behind him. Blue buff. A shimmering blue aura enveloped both Rhodes and Ursa, gently restoring their lost magic power. Go easy on him, don't crush him completely. Rhodes instructed, waving his hand forward. The Blue Sentinel lumbered toward Rocker, raising a stone fist the size of a sandbag and bringing it crashing down. This thing's way too big. Rocker yelped. Even so, he refused to back down. Gritting his teeth, his body spun like a high-speed drill. With a shout, he charged forward. Rock drill punch. Bang. The impact sent chips of stone flying from the Sentinel's fist. Rocker clung to the Sentinel's massive stone arm, but the force of the blow launched him backward. He crashed heavily against a nearby cliff. Rhodes stomped his foot lightly against the Sentinel's leg. Didn't I tell you to hold back a little? The Blue Sentinel sheepishly scratched its head, looking almost embarrassed. It had held back, at least a little. Luckily, Rocker seemed okay. Though disheveled, he staggered back to his feet and rushed forward again, gritting his teeth. It's not over yet. Wild. Get down. Rhodes interrupted. A cog burst from beneath the ground, clamping down on Rocker and dragging him halfway underground, leaving only his head sticking out. But Rocker wasn't ready to give up just yet. His body spun like a drill, burrowing through the soil before leaping back onto solid ground. 4. He shouted defiantly. The Blue Sentinel swung its massive fist with full force, stopping just inches from Rocker's nose. The fierce gust from the punch blew Rocker's messy hair backward. His cheeks rippled from the pressure, stretching his lips into a forced grin and nearly baring his teeth. Rhodes smiled kindly from the side. Would you like to admit defeat now? Yes. Rocker replied immediately, sweat dripping from his forehead. He wasn't the type to cling to pride. Facing a punch he knew he couldn't survive, he knew better than to embarrass Quattro Cerberus further. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Ursa moved with the speed and grace of a cheetah, slashing in swift, relentless arcs. The twin swords traced shining silver trails in the air, each strike fast and precise, like a predator's claws slicing through its prey. But Bacchus fought like a drunken master, almost like a human tumbler. Every time the blades neared him, he would stagger or fall at impossible angles, dodging the attacks in ways that defied logic. When Ursa tried to follow up, he'd roll upright again like it was nothing. Speed type. That won't work on me. Bacchus sparked, staggering forward. With a sharp slap, he struck Ursa's wrist, knocking one of her swords away, and with his other hand, slammed a heavy palm strike into her shoulder. Ugh! Ursa grimaced as the shoulder plate of her armor shattered. She clutched her reddening left shoulder. The force to shatter armor in a single hit. And the reaction speed to counter my armor techniques. Ursa muttered. You're strong. Bacchus grinned, arms spread wide like a hawk ready to swoop. The hit was aimed for your chin. You're pretty good to avoid a fatal blow even at that range. He said, laughing drunkenly. But your speed is. Huh? Bacchus froze mid-sentence. He felt something warm slide down his cheek. A thin line of blood had appeared across his face. At some point during their exchange, Ursa had managed to land a shallow cut. Watching from a distance, Rhodes chuckled. Looks like they're about evenly matched. While Ursa had durability on her side, it wasn't something that would instantly turn the tide. The armor was a tool for endurance battles. If the fight continued at this pace, Bacchus would eventually wear himself out and lose. But that wasn't their goal. Rhodes decided it was time to step in. Chapter 203, Helping Out. Rocker stared wide-eyed. That woman's really strong. She's fighting Bacchus to a standstill. Rhodes chuckled quietly. Holding his pendant, he recalled the other summoned creatures back to their marks. Summon. Brambleback. Hey, what are you doing? Rocker stammered. Helping, of course. This is a team competition, remember? Rhodes said matter-of-factly, pointing at Ursa. Red buff. A brilliant red glow flared around Ursa, mingling with the soft blue light that was already surrounding her from earlier. Rhodes felt the drain and recovery of magic happening simultaneously, and for a moment, he felt like he was solving one of those elementary school math problems about filling and emptying water tanks. After a quick calculation, he couldn't help but feel a little moved. Finally, Brambleback could be used properly in a real battle instead of being treated like a single-use burst. No, being precise, barely usable for regular combat. Still, that was progress. Rhodes pointed dramatically at Bacchus. Get him. The Brambleback rumbled forward, its limbs pounding the ground heavily. Compared to the blue sentinel, it was clearly faster. Bacchus noticed the movement out of the corner of his eye. Rocker? Rocker sheepishly raised one hand. Big bro. I lost. Bacchus blinked in disbelief. Rocker wasn't weak. If he were, Master Goldmine wouldn't have assigned him as Bacchus's partner for this mission. And yet, he got taken down this fast? You better watch yourself. Mirza warned, a small smile tugging at her lips. Rhodes likes giving people surprises. The pain in her shoulder was already subsiding rapidly, and with a flash of light, a fresh sword appeared in her right hand. She charged Bacchus once again, her dual blades flashing in the air. Surprise, huh? You mean that big guy? Bacchus chuckled drunkenly, weaving side to side to dodge her slashes. The Brambleback was already on him, swinging one claw in a wide arc. The force of the swing stirred the air itself. A large enough attack range, perfect for restraining slippery targets. TCH, what the heck is that thing, drunken chop? Bacchus's right palm glowed with dense magic as he slammed it into the Brambleback's claw. Boom. A heavy, thunderous impact echoed across the field. The ground trembled faintly. What the? Bacchus stumbled back several steps, his purple-armored gauntlet shattered. His right arm trembled slightly from the force of the blow. What is this power? Meanwhile, the Brambleback let out a deep, resonant roar. Its massive claw, battered and cracked, resembled a tree limb struck by lightning, splinters scattering everywhere. The Brambleback's defense wasn't as high as the Blue Sentinel's, but its speed and attack power were far superior. Give up, Bacchus. Mirza shouted. With a powerful downward slash, both her swords came crashing toward him. It's not over yet. Bacchus roared back. Magic gathered in his palms as he raised both hands, ready to block her strike with nothing but his bare hands. Boom. The twin blades clashed against his palms, producing a heavy, blunt impact. The earth beneath Bacchus's feet cracked from the sheer force. Bacchus gritted his teeth. Normally, Armor's attacks were speedy but not powerful enough to threaten him. But this time, the crimson glow from red buff-coated Riz's blades, flaring like living flame. Bacchus felt a sharp, burning sting travel up his arms. Cracks spread across the armor on his left arm, and then the gauntlet exploded into shards. The damage on his right arm worsened, leaving him barely able to hold off the second sword. The blade stopped just at the tip of his nose. Bacchus closed his eyes, then let out a rough, free-spirited laugh. Ha ha. I'll lose. Riz lowered her swords, her armor dissolving as she returned to her usual attire. It wasn't just me who beat you, she said warmly. It was us. Bacchus laughed again, slumping onto the ground and fumbling for his wine gourd. His arm trembled slightly as he lifted it for a drink. Man. The old man's gonna lecture me so bad when I get back. Rhodes strolled over, and before dismissing the Brambleback, he lightly tapped Bacchus on the forehead. Red buff. A gentle, healing warmth washed over Bacchus. He felt the pain in his arms gradually ease. This magic. Bacchus murmured, blinking groggily. What's it called again? Forget it. You've got a great partner. Bacchus said to Riza with a lopsided grin. Riza smiled, calm and proud. I think so too. Thank you. Rhodes said quickly, trying his best to maintain a straight face. Hey, no need to hold back, feel free to praise me even more. Rocker stumbled over, rubbing his swollen cheek, and grumbled. Hey. Why didn't you heal me too? Sorry. Rhodes said without an ounce of guilt. This kind of magic can only be used on two people in a short amount of time. And between the two of you, he's more seriously injured. Rocker pouted pitifully but didn't argue further. All right, Rocker. Bacchus said, clapping his shoulder with his still sore hand. Since the match is decided, let's head back. He turned to Riza and Rhodes, grinning. I look forward to fighting you again. Rhodes tilted his head innocently. Normally, shouldn't the losers stick around and listen to the winner's instructions? Help us finish the mission first before you leave? Huh? Bacchus blinked, swaying slightly. It wasn't clear if he was truly drunk or just pretending. It's not against the rules to punish the losers, he said. But are you sure you want us interfering in your mission? From a purely selfish angle, having more S-class firepower wouldn't hurt. But from a guild pride perspective, it was definitely better if Fairy Tail handled this themselves. Mirza agreed without hesitation. We'll see you next time. Settling a disturbance before the real mission even started was a good thing. Blame the old man for stirring up trouble. Rhodes thought darkly. He was already planning to plot with Meyer later, maybe slip some extra chili oil into Makarov's wine for revenge. Bacchus and Rocker waved casually and headed off. After resting for a bit, Urza and Rhodes got back to work, continuing their search for clues. They hadn't walked far when Rhodes suddenly slapped his thigh. Ah, shoot. I forgot to ask for compensation. Compensation? Urza blinked. Yeah. Your armor's shoulder plate and 2 of your Heaven's Wheel swords got broken during the fight. Rhodes pointed out. Is the mission reward even enough to cover the repair costs? Urza did a quick calculation in her head. The basic repairs aren't that expensive. Today's losses. Maybe tens of thousands of jewels. Tens of thousands. Rhodes muttered. He suddenly realized just how much his mindset had shifted. His part-time job only paid around 120,000 jewels a month, and here he was thinking that spending tens of thousands on armor repairs wasn't expensive. Urza's requip magic definitely wasn't something the average wizard could afford. The rich rely on technology, the poor rely on mutation. As the sun dipped lower, the temperature dropped sharply, and a thin layer of mist began to rise from the ground. Gradually, the mist thickened, shrouding the battlefield and cutting off their line of sight. Rhodes. Urza said quietly. Yeah. Rhodes nodded. He understood immediately. Something was not right. There was a strange, heavy sensation in the mist, like they were being watched by countless unseen eyes. Rhodes and Urza stood back to back, moving closer together, both on high alert for sudden attacks. Rhodes called back his 2 scuttle crabs, positioning them 3 meters away, one in front and one behind, as mobile sentries. But even at that distance, the thick fog made it hard to see them. The raptors circled wider, stationed at the edge of the scuttle crab's visibility, relying solely on their instincts and physical senses for reconnaissance. Suddenly, 2 faint red lights flared within the mist. There was a sharp, startled cry and one of the raptors vanished. Urza bolted toward the source instantly, but whoever or whatever had attacked was already gone. Feather storm. Rhodes barked. The remaining raptors scattered in all directions, releasing a flurry of razor-sharp feathers. But there was no satisfying ping of feathers hitting flesh, only the soft sound of feathers embedding themselves uselessly in the ground. Then, another sharp cry and another raptor vanished. Using the vision shared through the scuttle crabs, Rhodes caught a glimpse of a dark, humanoid silhouette flashing by. Humanoid? Wearing something that looks like armor. Rhodes reported calmly, relaying everything he had seen in those precious seconds. Chapter 204, Is it true? I don't believe it. This doesn't make any sense. This is totally unreasonable. Watching his summons being picked off one by one, Rhodes felt more and more that something was off. If the enemy was truly strong enough to wipe out monsters this easily, how had the hunters from the village even survived? Maybe it reached some condition that made it stronger than before. Urza said, clad in her Heaven's Wheel armor. Just now, she had unleashed a barrage of flying swords. Both of them had heard the sound of metal clashing, but the enemy's assault didn't even slow down. The attack must have been blocked. Take over, Merc Wolf form. Rhodes said, switching to a summon better suited for detection in the thick fog. He and Urza slowly retreated again. The 2 remaining scuttle crabs and 2 raptors also pulled back to form a defensive line in front of them. The merc wolves had already been wiped out because they could track the enemy's movements. Now, Rhodes himself had become the most vulnerable target. Did you find anything? Urza asked. There's a faint scent of rust. And blood, but very faint. Left side. Rhodes alerted. 16 of Urza's Heaven's Wheel swords fired at once, and a shadowy figure within the fog swung its blade, knocking away several swords. 3 still pierced its chest and shoulders. But it didn't fall. Instead, it continued its charge. Heaven's Wheel, pentagram sword. Urza cried. She slashed her twin blades through the air, drawing a 5-pointed star of intersecting sword arcs. The humanoid shadow was struck by the slash, and armor pieces clattered to the ground as it collapsed backward. This time, Rhodes clearly caught the strong scent of blood. Looks like there was a real person inside after all. It felt human when I struck it. Urza said calmly. This should be the target of our mission. We'll take both the person and the sword back. Urza stepped forward, but suddenly raised her swords defensively. The man who had just fallen sprang to his feet again. The scattered pieces of armor floated back and reassembled onto him piece by piece. He rushed Urza again. Urza crossed her swords and slashed, their figures blurring past each other in a sharp clash. 2 of Urza's Heaven's Wheel swords were cut cleanly in half, and even the steel wings on her back were sliced apart. Requip. Blackwing armor. Urza switched armors in a flash. Black wings flared behind her as she shot forward like a shadow. Moon flash. She shouted. Her blade sliced through the enemy's chest, splitting his breastplate diagonally. Blood sprayed from the wound as he stumbled. But before he even hit the ground, the breastplate shards flew back to him. Merc Wolf. Rhodes called. A dark, shadowy wolf spirit shot forward, biting onto the cursed sword the armored man was holding. Rhodes remembered that their true mission target was this sword, not the man himself. The screech of metal grinding against teeth rang out, sharp and uncomfortable. The armored man struggled to pull the sword back, but the wolf clamped down tightly. Mirza moved in, slashing at the man's wrist. There was a sharp crack. His gauntlet shattered and the cursed sword was yanked away along with it, clenched firmly in the jaws of the wolf. Without the sword, the armored figure collapsed onto one knee, visibly weakened. But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, the ground began to tremble slightly. From the mist, skeletal hands clawed up from the earth. One after another, skeletons dragged themselves free. Then another. And another. In mere seconds, the entire battlefield was filled with skeletal warriors, rising eerily from the ground. The sight was terrifying. Rhodes hesitated to touch the cursed sword directly, fearing he might become contaminated by its magic. But the skeletal soldiers surged toward them. Crack. Crack. The scuttle crabs snapped their massive pincers, smashing skeletons apart easily. But broken bones quickly reassembled themselves, pulling back together as if nothing had happened. Great, it's a self-repairing army. Rhodes muttered. He briefly considered summoning the void grub to eat them all. Before he could act, Mirza gripped her sword with both hands and struck down fiercely, targeting the cursed sword lying on the ground. Clang. Sparks flew, and a deep crack split the earth beneath the blade. But the rusted sword itself only showed a faint scratch. It was like hitting an indestructible artifact. And as if that attack had triggered something, the skeletons went berserk, lunging at Rhodes and Mirza with wild frenzy. Mirza's eyes narrowed in understanding. The sword's definitely the key. Take over, Raptor. Rhodes transformed. Wings of crimson energy burst from his back. He grabbed Mirza by the shoulders with two massive bird talons and lifted her into the sky. Feather storm. A flurry of razor-sharp feathers rained down, each one piercing straight through the skulls of the skeleton soldiers, halting their advance. Requip, giant armor. Spear of purging evil. Mirza shouted. Rhodes nodded and released her. Mirza twisted her body midair, stretching into a perfect arc, and hurled the spear down with all her strength. Evil purging spear. The spear turned into a streak of brilliant light, tearing through the air with a force that ordinary people could hardly imagine, striking the center of the rusted sword lying on the ground. A blinding white light exploded outward, and from the sword, a dark purple, ominous aura tried to rise, but it was immediately swallowed by the intense radiance. The cursed sword shattered into countless fragments. Boom. The spear of purging evil unleashed a massive shockwave, a blinding wave of white light sweeping across the battlefield. The blast force scattered the thick mist and blasted away the nearby skeleton soldiers, leaving them powerless. The armored man was hurled backward by the impact. His helmet flew off, and the pieces of his armor clattered to the ground. This time, the armor pieces did not float back to him. Lying there was a young man. Or what seemed to be a young man. It was hard to tell his exact age. His skin was deathly pale, his face sunken and dry, and his limbs shriveled like a mummy. Yet strangely enough, when wounded earlier, he had still bled. No new skeletons rose from the ground, and the dense fog that had blanketed the battlefield slowly began to disperse. Remaining alert, Rhodes and Mirza cautiously approached the fallen figure. Mirza knelt down and pressed two fingers to his neck. He's human. He's still alive. Rhodes stretched out his hand and traced a rune in the air. Solid script, water. Clear, shimmering water formed from his magic, sprinkling gently onto the young man's face. Slowly, the young man stirred, his dry lips parting as he coughed weakly. Cough. Cough. Where am I? His voice was feeble, each word an effort. Mirza, her tone firm but not harsh, asked, we should be asking you. Who are you? And why were you attacking people near here? The young man's eyes slowly cleared. After a moment's thought, he whispered. Mansi. That's my name. Rhodes blinked. Mansi? That sounds familiar. The young man managed a weak laugh. I'm a descendant of General Iri Mansi. Iri Mansi? Mirza echoed, frowning. The war criminal who slaughtered innocents during the battle 200 years ago. She recalled the story the village chief had told them. The ruthless general who had been consumed by bloodlust and betrayal. So you came here looking for your ancestors' relics? Mirza continued. Hoping to claim his power? Yes. And no. He said, a bitter smile tugging at his dry lips. 200 years ago, my ancestors' crimes caused a rebellion. His actions led to the defeat of the Seven Kingdoms forces. Afterward, he was branded a war criminal by 3 countries, and our entire family was ostracized and oppressed ever since. His voice shook, but he pressed on. I didn't want our family to live under that shadow anymore. I wanted to find the sword, the one that corrupted him, and destroy it. To make a public apology before the royal palace, to plead for a normal life for our descendants. He paused, trembling slightly. But I never expected. After all my efforts to find it, I'd immediately fall under its influence. The sword forced me to seek out my ancestors' broken armor. It made me crave bloodshed. His expression twisted with shame. A few days ago, someone wandered in. I tried to fight the sword's will, but I still ended up hurting them. I heard that anyone wounded by this sword would be cursed. I don't know how they are now. Rhodes listened quietly, then straightened up and said bluntly, I don't believe you. Chapter 205, Heartbeat. Honestly, it was hard to say whether that trusty sword had cursed its victims when it cut them. But at the very least, tetanus was basically guaranteed. The real problem was that, despite how pitiful this guy looked, like he had been drained dry by the sword, a victim himself, Rhodes was not about to trust him at face value. The whole story about coming here just to destroy the sword could easily be a lie. There was no way to prove his motives either. Maybe some wizard specialized in interrogation magic that could detect lies, but Rhodes certainly was not one of them. We can't verify your story, Rhodes said evenly. But what we do know is that you took up that sword, put on that armor, and injured over a dozen hunters and 3 wizards. He glanced sideways at Mirza, then added, not to mention, you damaged our weapons and armor, and stirred up panic across this whole region. As the wizards tasked with investigating this case, we're obligated to bring you back for questioning. Are you willing to cooperate? Without hesitation, Mansi nodded. I'm willing to take responsibility for what I've done. He was in no condition to resist anyway, and the 2 wizards in front of him did not seem like the unreasonable type. Rhodes casually pulled out a piece of chocolate and popped it into Mansi's mouth to give him a little strength. But just to be safe, he still tied the guy's hands and feet without mercy. Mirza hesitated, frowning a little. Isn't that going a bit far? We don't have a choice. Rhodes replied, knotting the ropes firmly. Strictly speaking, this guy's now a criminal suspect. He paused, thinking aloud. Will it cause trouble if we bring someone from the 7 kingdoms back across the border? Cross-border arrests were not exactly covered in his training. Mirza shook her head confidently. He injured citizens of the kingdom of Fiore while inside Fiore's borders. Since we didn't cause much damage when subduing him, there won't be any diplomatic issues. Got it. Rhodes said, relieved. He stretched out his hand, and with a flash of light, summoned a cloth bag from his requip magic. Mirza blinked, surprised. You're already that skilled at requip? There's still a few small accidents when changing clothes. Rhodes admitted, chuckling. But for retrieving and storing stuff, I'm good. He crouched down and began picking up scattered pieces of armor and fragments of the broken sword, carefully placing them into the bag. Mirza did the same, collecting pieces as evidence to prove they had completed the mission. Rhodes also summoned one of his krugs, using it to bury some leftover fragments deep underground, just in case, to prevent any trouble for the villagers later. After tidying everything up, Rhodes called over the 2 surviving scuttle crabs. They gently picked up the still weak Mansi, and the group began their slow journey back to the village. By now, the sun had completely set, plunging the battlefield into darkness. Thankfully, Mirza had thought ahead. She lit a portable lantern she had brought along and even swapped into a miner's outfit, complete with a helmet that had a headlamp strapped on top. The sight of Mirza wearing it so seriously made Rhodes want to laugh, and honestly, he kind of wanted to try it too. Sure, he could easily use his solid script magic to summon light, but after everything that happened today, he really did not feel like spending any extra magic energy. With a headlamp shining the way, they continued down the path. Rhodes, Mirza said suddenly, swinging the beam toward a patch off the trail. Rhodes followed the light. Growing there, untouched by the devastation, was a cluster of delicate winter-blooming flowers, their fragrance gently drifting through the cold air. Winter sweet, Mirza murmured. I didn't notice it on the way here. Rhodes said, taking a deep breath of the sweet scent. It smells really nice. Mirza gazed at the flowers thoughtfully. Even on a battlefield as cruel as this, flowers can bloom again after hundreds of years. Rhodes stayed silent, simply admiring the small miracle. 200 years ago, perhaps winter sweets bloomed all across this field too, until war trampled them into the dust. But here they were now, quietly blooming once more. Without saying anything to break the mood, Rhodes just smiled faintly and continued walking forward. You're finally back. I'm so glad you're all right, truly glad you're safe. The village chief said, breathing a visible sigh of relief. When the 2 wizards hadn't returned after so long, he had begun to fear the worst. Not only are we fine, Mirza said, stepping forward and handing over the cloth bag. We've completed the mission as well. Inside, the fragments of rusty iron clinked with a harsh, metallic sound. Completed? The village chief repeated, a little stunned. That's right. Mirza confirmed with a nod. The cursed sword and the set of armor were destroyed by us. She then pointed to Mansi, who was slumped on the back of the scuttle crab. And we've also captured the person responsible for these incidents. Who was he? The village chief asked, blinking in confusion. Rhodes spoke up calmly. The situation is a bit complicated. We'll explain everything properly. Yes, I see. Please, come inside first. Have the two of you eaten yet? The village chief hurriedly ushered them into his home and called for the children to prepare food. Even Mansi received a portion. After all, a suspect still needed to eat. Over a simple but hearty meal, Rhodes and Reza patiently explained the entire series of events. The village chief listened carefully. Though he was quite happy to hand over the promised reward money, he looked troubled about how to deal with Mansi afterward. After some hesitation, he realized there was no need for him, a small village chief, to worry about such matters. He could simply hand Mansi over to the mayor in the morning. That night, the village chief thoughtfully arranged for Rhodes and Reza to stay in the same room. Rhodes immediately dragged their suitcases over to form a wall between their two beds. As he lay back, staring at the ceiling, he found himself wondering whether he should take fewer long-distance missions with Reza in the future. But honestly, partnering with Reza was easy. He mostly needed to play support, which saved a lot of brain power compared to teaming up with others. Plus, the money came fast. Team missions like this were really not bad at all. Lost in his thoughts, Rhodes quickly drifted off to sleep. The next morning, the two of them agreed to escort Mansi to the city as the village chief requested. However, Rhodes asked Reza to delay their departure a little. Reza, thinking he was simply tired from yesterday's battle and wanted a bit more rest, didn't mind at all. Since they set off late and had to handle the formalities surrounding Mansi on the way, it was already evening by the time they finally boarded the train back to Magnolia. Rhodes glanced at the time. Is the guild closed by now? Reza nodded. Yeah, it is. We can report the mission tomorrow. Then, should we split up here? Rhodes asked. Is the girls' dorm closed too? Of course not. Reza said, giving a small laugh as she pulled her luggage cart along. See you tomorrow. It was a pleasure working with you. Same here. See you tomorrow. Reza clearly didn't need him to walk her back. So, Rhodes summoned Worm and headed toward home with the little guy trailing behind. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, Rhodes noticed something odd. The lights in his apartment were on. I'm pretty sure I turned them off before leaving, he muttered, suspicion rising. Without wasting a second, he bolted up the stairs, leaving Worm confused behind him. Whoa? Worm tilted its head, puzzled. Was Rhodes chasing a thief? Rhodes fished out his key, took a deep breath, and quietly unlocked the door. The door swung open, and the sight that greeted him made him freeze. A familiar figure stood in the living room, wearing a dark apron and a scarf tied neatly around her hair. A small feather duster was in her hand as she stood on tiptoe, reaching up to wipe the dust from a picture frame. She must have heard the door open because she turned around, blinking in surprise. Then a bright, gentle smile lit up her face. Without even thinking, she said warmly, "Welcome home." Rhodes stood rooted to the spot, unable to find his voice. He could hear his heartbeat pounding in his chest. Was it because he had sprinted up the stairs? No. He knew it wasn't. It was because of the girl standing right there in his living room. The way she turned around, the way she smiled at him under the warm light, it was like time itself had frozen around her. Rhodes thought, deep down, that he would remember this scene forever. Chapter 206, I don't want to be reasonable I. Rhodes was startled to realize, he couldn't get the words out. What's wrong? You're the one who gave me the key. Myra said teasingly, smiling as she walked toward the door, clearly wanting to tease Rhodes a little for his dazed expression. But halfway there, she realized something. This was his house. She was dressed like this, an apron tied around her waist, a scarf on her head, a feather duster in hand, and she had just casually said those words. In this kind of scene, Myra's face flushed pink. She had clearly walked right up to him, slightly tilting her head to look up at him, but now the words caught in her throat. Her expression, the way she moved, the way she looked into his eyes, it was all devastatingly fatal to Rhodes. His heartbeat quickened, becoming louder and heavier. No, it wasn't because he had sprinted up the stairs earlier. It was purely because of the girl standing right in front of him. Rhodes's eyes grew more determined. His heart pounded wildly in his chest. He stared directly into her eyes, and the words he had been holding back for so long could no longer be contained. Myra, I. Before he could finish, 4 slender, warm fingers pressed lightly against his lips. Don't say it. Myra whispered. Her eyes were filled with panic as she looked away, her heart racing uncontrollably. She was scared. Even though they had quietly developed a deep understanding over the past few days, and even though she had known deep down that this moment would come eventually, when it truly arrived, she was terrified. Terrified of what she might do once Rhodes said those words aloud. She didn't want to make a decision she would regret. She didn't want to hurt either of them for reasons that had nothing to do with feelings. At least. Not now, okay? Myra pleaded softly, lifting her gaze back to meet his. Faced with such a look, Rhodes couldn't possibly refuse. After calming down, he realized maybe he had been a little too impulsive. But even so right now, he wanted to hug her. Sometimes, a person's body moved faster than their thoughts. Before he could think twice, he gently wrapped his arms around her. Myra's body stiffened for a second, and the hand on Rhodes's lips fell to her side. But she didn't push him away. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The room was so silent that it felt like they could hear each other's heartbeats. Or maybe it was just their own hearts pounding in their ears. Slowly, Myra lifted her hands behind Rhodes's back. But just when he thought she might return the hug, she gave him a light push. I should go home," she said hurriedly. Myra lowered her head and darted toward the door, unable to summon the courage to look him in the face. Rhodes panicked a little too. He realized he had been completely irrational tonight. His brain, which usually worked just fine, had stopped working entirely. Had he been too rude? Had he upset her? Had he gone too far? Should he stop her? Should he explain? Maybe he could joke around and ease the awkwardness? A flood of chaotic thoughts crashed into him, one after another, impossible to sort out. Until Myra, standing at the door, paused. In a voice so soft it was barely a whisper, she said, "See you tomorrow." All those messy thoughts instantly vanished. Rhodes smiled and answered without hesitation. "See you tomorrow." He had said those same words to two different people today. But the first time, it had been just polite formality. This time, it was full of expectation and warmth. Completely different feelings. Myra quickly walked down the stairs with her apron still on, trying to compose herself. Halfway down, she ran into Worm, who was struggling to come up the stairs. Worm tried to rush over and nuzzle against her for affection. But Myra didn't even notice him, hurrying past. Worm stood there, blinking his big round eyes in confusion. Had they fought? Would that mean one less person to feed him from now on? No. Rhodes called Worm into the house. As he watched Myra disappear around the corner of the stairs, he suddenly noticed her coat still hanging on the hook by the door. She had rushed out in such a hurry that she didn't even realize she was still wearing a headscarf and apron. The winter night air was cold, but Myra only felt the heat burning her cheeks. It was impossible to turn back now. Even if she slowed down, she worried he might catch up. And she definitely didn't want him delivering her coat personally today. Myra quickened her steps, but just as she turned the corner, she caught sight of a giant crab approaching. Startled, she almost bolted before realizing that it wasn't a person riding on its back, but a small, fluffy ball of fur. Worm. On Worm's back, neatly folded, was her coat. The little guy had been sent on an errand. Worm, tasked with delivering the coat, lay stiffly on the crab's back, pitifully still. His unscrupulous master had warned him very seriously, "If you drop the clothes, no dinner tomorrow." Feeling wronged but too afraid to move, Worm stayed frozen in place. Seeing Worm's miserable little act, Myra couldn't help but soften. She took her coat, slipped it on, and gently rubbed Worm's head. "All right, I got it. You can go back now," she said softly. But Worm and the crab didn't turn around. Instead, they silently trailed behind Myra. Myra walked forward, pausing here and there. And behind her, the crab and Worm paused too. No one spoke, but it felt like she could hear them insisting stubbornly. She sighed helplessly. All right, I get it." Myra stepped lightly onto the crab's back. Worm immediately shuffled aside, revealing a soft, warm cushion underneath. Myra reached out and touched it. It was warm. She pouted. That person really was ridiculous. Still, she settled onto the cushion and pulled Worm into her arms. What winter, what cold wind. It was perfectly warm like this. Worm let out a contented purr. Maybe tomorrow, he would even get double portions. When they finally reached her doorstep, Myra suddenly realized something. Someone must have seen this entire scene. Humphrey. She huffed, lightly swatting Worm's head before quickly turning and slipping inside, shutting the door firmly behind her. She even locked both the scuttle crab and Worm outside. Worm stood there, feeling wronged. Why did he get smacked for no reason? Back at his own place, Rhodes hadn't moved an inch since Myra left. He was still sitting on his bed, grinning like an idiot. Lying down, he rolled over and buried his face into his pillow, unable to wipe the smile off his face. His whole body curled up in happiness. Today, he had hugged Myra. It hadn't been an accident. It wasn't forced. He had hugged her, willingly and warmly. The rush he felt right now was far greater than the excitement of earning 1,000,000 jewels yesterday. No, he shouldn't lose his head. He needed to think about this rationally. Forget rationality. Rationality was nonsense. He hugged Myra today. And the memory of her slender fingers pressing lightly against his lips still burned vividly in his mind. I don't want to be rational anymore, ha ha ha. Rhodes twisted and squirmed happily on the bed like a bug, unable to contain his joy. Every time he replayed what had just happened in his mind, the happiness bubbled up again, making him roll around even more. After a while, when Worm finally returned riding the scuttle crab, Rhodes decided it was time to wash up and calm down. Well, try to calm down. He. Worm tilted his round head, watching his master suspiciously. Has master finally gone crazy? If he has, will he spend all his money on delicious food for me? After cleaning up, Rhodes managed to sit still for about a second. Then he dove into his quilt, hiding under the covers and grinning foolishly all over again. Alright, time to think calmly. First off, Myra definitely wasn't mad. Second, if he thought carefully, he was pretty sure she had rested her cheek against his chest just now. Even though she had stopped him from speaking, it was obvious she knew exactly what he wanted to say. It was the kind of moment where even without words, everything had already been said. What's going to happen when we see each other tomorrow? Rhodes smiled giddily under the covers, full of anticipation. It was no use. He couldn't fall asleep at all. Hurriedly Worm chirped, hopping around the bedroom on his short legs. Oh right, I almost forgot about you. Rhodes said, scooping him up. He lifted Worm and weighed him in his arms. You've gotten heavier again, haven't you? Worm looked up at him innocently. No way. I'm not fat. I just grew a little. The quilt can barely cover you anymore. Rhodes grumbled, stuffing Worm under the blanket anyway. Then he reached out and hugged Worm close. Tonight, Worm had made a great contribution. Chapter 207, It's obvious that they are in love. Mancy, who claims to be a descendant of General Mancy of the Seven Kingdoms, has been handed over to the local city hall for processing according to the client's request. Mirza reported formally at the guild's front desk. I believe we should keep an eye on how the situation is handled from here. That's all. Makarov nodded, clearly satisfied. Mirza was the kind of wizard who rarely gave him any reason to worry. And Rhodes, despite his occasional mischief, was the kind who made even the non-troublemakers worry a little less. He was very pleased with how this pairing turned out. Not only had they completed the mission perfectly, they had also handled the aftermath smoothly. More importantly, they had helped him beat Goldmine in their little competition between guilds. Just as Makarov had expected, Mirza plus Rhodes was much stronger than Bacchus plus that partner of his. Truly a golden team. Next time a similar situation comes up, I'll definitely send them again. But just as he was basking in satisfaction, Makarov noticed something odd. Why is Rhodes so quiet today? He asked, puzzled. Huh? Rhodes, who had been completely spaced out, reacted like a student being called on unexpectedly. It seemed even this energetic kid could get distracted sometimes. Makarov asked again. Do you have anything to add? No. Mirza explained it perfectly. Rhodes answered, a bit absent-mindedly. Mirza did explain it well, but why did Rhodes keep sneaking glances at Myra? Makarov squinted but decided to let it slide. He was in too good a mood to start poking around. Anyway, good job. Myra, you'll take it from here. Myra? Ah. Yes, master. Myra straightened up quickly, clearly flustered. Makarov's eyes flicked between Myra and Rhodes. Oh ho. The old master, an experienced man in these matters, instantly guessed what had happened without needing to ask. Smiling to himself, Makarov hopped down from the counter, hands tucked behind his back. All right, I'll leave the rest to you. It's good to be young. Myra quickly lowered her head, focusing intently on writing the mission report. After she finished, she handed the signed form to Mirza and Rhodes. When Rhodes reached out to return the register and pen, their fingertips brushed. Myra jerked her hand back like she had been shocked, and the pen clattered onto the table. The two of them stared at each other for a moment. Myra immediately realized she had overreacted. Normally, she wouldn't even notice such small touches. Stay natural, stay natural. Myra quickly picked up the pen and continued working as if nothing had happened. Thanks to her flustered reaction, Rhodes started feeling restless too, unsure where to look or what to do. Meanwhile, Mirza watched the whole exchange thoughtfully, her sharp gaze darting between Myra and Rhodes. Could it be? She began. No. Myra blurted out, her voice a little too loud. At the same time, Mirza finished her question. That you two quarreled? Rhodes glanced at Myra's embarrassed face and smiled. No, really. He said truthfully. Myra's cheeks puffed out slightly, her eyes wide with frustration. It's good you didn't argue. Mirza said seriously, nodding. We're all guildmates. If anything happens, you should sit down and talk it out calmly. Then, she she added with perfect sincerity. And if you need a mediator, just let me know. Rhodes glanced at Myra with a grin. Do you need a mediator? He teased gently. Myra quickly waved her hand, smiling sweetly but with a certain dangerous glint in her eyes. No need. She tilted her head. Would you like to help behind the counter instead? Okay. Rhodes felt something ominous in the air but decided it was better not to argue. As he moved to stand behind the counter, a sudden sharp pain shot through his foot. Hiss. He hissed through his teeth, his toes throbbing. Myra smiled innocently. What's wrong? Nothing. I just banged my knee on the counter. Rhodes muttered while reaching under the desk for the ledger. Let's start working. In that case, I'll head out first, Mirza said, gathering her things. She had 2 armors that needed repairing. Myra tucked her foot back under the counter, feeling a little more normal after that playful moment. Even so, she still wasn't quite sure how to talk to Rhodes after everything that happened yesterday. Rhodes glanced at her. Seeing that her expression had returned to normal and she was focused on her work, he asked casually. When was the last time you ordered wine? The day before yesterday. And the expenses? The bill's in the drawer. Same for the ingredients I bought yesterday. I haven't had time to record them yet. Got it. They continued working as usual, the atmosphere gradually settling back to normal. Though their eye contact was definitely more frequent than before. Just then, Gray approached the counter and placed a commission form down. Myra, here's my mission request. All right. Myra said, taking a glance at the form. Are you going solo? No, I'm teaming up with Loke. Loke? Myra looked around, spotting Loke half hiding outside the guild doors. He waved sheepishly when he noticed her gaze. Myra chuckled and commented quietly to Rhodes. Loke's still like that. Rhodes shrugged helplessly. You'd think he'd be used to me by now. Am I supposed to believe he'll just stop working because I'm standing here? Who knows? Gray replied, then added. Are you sure you didn't do anything to him? Rhodes sighed. I've barely exchanged 10 sentences with him, and half of those were when I first asked him to spar. Gray laughed. Want me to mediate? Rhodes side-eyed Myra pointedly. Why is today all about mediation? If you can manage it. Rhodes said dryly. Myra glared at Rhodes in return. Wasn't he the one suggesting mediation earlier too? Suppressing her exasperation, Myra stamped Gray's request form and handed it back. It's a little dangerous. Be careful out there. Thanks. Gray accepted it with a nod and turned to leave. After a few steps, he glanced back suspiciously. Something feels off about those two today. Outside the guild doors, Loke was waiting with his hands stuffed into his pockets. You're slow, Gray. Loke complained. Sorry, I just think Myra and Rhodes were acting weird today. Loke adjusted his sunglasses coolly. What's weird about it? It's pretty obvious, he said, grinning knowingly. They're totally in love. Gray nearly stumbled. No way. Plenty of people in the guild knew that Rhodes had feelings for Myra. Normally, the two of them were friendly, maybe even a little too friendly sometimes, but it had never been this obvious. If anything, Elzik and Biska's progress was much faster compared to those two. And even though Myra's personality had softened a lot over time, making her more approachable and admired, Rhodes wasn't the only one who harbored feelings for her. Many people were attracted by her beauty. Still, no one dared to formally pursue her. Everyone in the guild knew exactly where the title Demon Mara Jane came from. In fact, there were still a few people who hadn't completely adjusted to Myra's current general image. Falling in love with Mara Jane? It was something that still felt hard to imagine for some. Trust me, Loke said confidently, his glasses flashing with a wise glint. I'm never wrong about these things. It's not easy to hide when you admire someone. There were signs before, but now. Loke trailed off meaningfully. Now what? Gray asked. Loke clasped his left hand over his right, flashing a seasoned, knowing smile. They've made some serious progress. Gray made a face like he had bitten into something sour. Loke was great at reading people, sure, but when it came to relationships, he was way too into it. By the way, Gray said casually. When are you going to reconcile with Rhodes? The ever-smooth Loke immediately stiffened. What reconciliation? There's no conflict between us. Then why are you avoiding him? Don't give me that lame excuse about not getting along with celestial spirit mages. Rhodes isn't one. Still. Even if he's not a celestial spirit mage, he's a summoner. Loke muttered, looking away. He clearly didn't want to talk about it anymore, so he hastily tried to change the subject, blurting out the first thing that came to mind. That coat over there looks really expensive. Should you really just toss it like that? Huh? Gray blinked, caught completely off guard. Chapter 208, Something is wrong, Sister Myra, we have to take this mission. Levy said as she handed over a commission sheet. Team Shadowgear was finally heading out again. Because of Jet's injury, they hadn't taken any jobs in a while. Levy had been picking up small, simple requests with the newcomer Tano recently, helping earn a little money. Troy looked about ready to collapse from the stress. Especially Jet, who now had hospital bills piled up after getting hurt. Now that his leg had healed, he was more than eager to jump back into work and make some cash. "Let me take a look," Myra said, scanning the form. It was a case involving theft at a library. "It's not dangerous, but it won't be easy either. The incident happened 2 weeks ago. Are you sure you want to take this one?" "Since it's related to books, I really want to try," Levy said brightly. "And the pay isn't bad either." "No problem. Just leave it to me this time," Jet declared with full confidence. Troy immediately poured cold water over him. "You said the exact same thing last time. And ended up in the hospital. Can you not bring that up again?" Jet said, frantically waving his arms. "This time it's just catching a thief. No one can outrun me." "You idiot, that's not the point," Troy said dryly. "This time, it's more important to actually find them, not chase them. Stop arguing, both of you." Levy sighed and turned pleadingly to Myra. "Please, Sister Myra. If we don't take jobs, we're going to have trouble paying rent again soon." "All right then. Rhodes?" "1 second," Rhodes said, scribbling a few quick notes into the ledger before pulling out 2 forms and handing them over. Myra looked everything over and passed them along with the commission sheet to Levy. "Here's the client's notes on the case. Read them carefully on the way. Good luck." "Got it," Levy chirped, but she didn't leave right away. Instead, she stared at Rhodes and Myra behind the counter. "Is something wrong?" Myra asked. "Do you have more questions?" Rhodes also asked. "Are you thinking of asking for backup? But just so you know, adding one more person would split the reward a little thin." He had already glanced at the commission details. The reward was just 100,000 jewels. While teaming up with Levy and the others sounded fun, splitting that amount would be a little low. Rhodes suddenly realized he might be getting a little arrogant. After taking on 2 high-difficulty jobs, he was already starting to look down on rewards under 25,000 J. Maybe it was time to adjust his mindset. "No, that's not it." Levy waved her hands quickly. She glanced at Myra, her voice a little teasing. "I just feel like you two have such good chemistry." "Hey, Sister Myra, did something happen while we weren't around?" Being asked so directly again, Myra managed to keep a straight face this time. "No, nothing. Maybe Rhodes just got better at the work." Levy turned to Rhodes suspiciously. "Is that really it?" Rhodes smiled warmly. "Really? Nothing happened. Strange." Levy muttered as she left, clearly not believing a word of it. After finishing up the paperwork, Rhodes checked the clock. "It's about time. I'm heading to the backyard." Myra nodded. But Rhodes didn't move. "I said I'm going to the backyard," he repeated. Myra met his eyes, and when she did, she saw that full, teasing smile shining in them. She flushed slightly and snapped. "Just go already." Laughing, Rhodes slipped off toward the backyard. After warming up, doing push-ups, hanging crunches, and punching the sandbag for a while, Rhodes suddenly stopped and summoned Worm. Worm looked up at him with wide, expectant eyes. Was it finally time for a big meal? Rhodes squatted down, gently patting Worm's fluffy head, and asked thoughtfully. "Hey. Tell me honestly, have I gotten stupid and childish lately?" "Woo?" Worm tilted his head, blinking in confusion. Was that even a question? In Worm's opinion, the better question was whether he was hungry. "You only ever think about food," Rhodes said, sighing. He pulled out a thick bill and set it on Worm's head. "Here. Eat whatever you like." Worm lit up with excitement and immediately scrambled away, afraid Rhodes would change his mind. In no time at all, the bill was delivered into Myra's hands. "He gave this to you?" Myra asked with a small smile. Worm nodded, struggling a little under the weight of the money. "Such a waste," Myra muttered to herself, though there was a fondness in her voice. She rubbed Worm's head gently. "How about I ask Mr. Cook to make you something really special?" "Woo." Worm was so happy he rolled right off the counter. He popped back up immediately, bouncing excitedly again. Thanks to his soft, cushiony body, he didn't feel a thing. Later at lunch, Myra handed the money back to Rhodes. "Here. Take it." "But that's the meal money I gave to Worm," Rhodes said, looking confused. "I treated him to a meal already," Myra said. "We didn't need that much. At a regular restaurant, 4,000 or 5,000 jewels were enough to feed 2 or 3 people really well. 10,000 was definitely over the top." "Oh." Rhodes scratched his head, thinking for a moment. Then. "How about I treat you to dinner tonight?" "No." Myra replied quickly, noticing the little flash of disappointment on his face. She looked away and added, "Maybe in a few days." If she agreed now, it would feel like she was stealing Worm's meal money. She figured she'd just spoil Worm with extra treats for a few days instead. All right. Rhodes was still smiling, his mood completely lifted. Then he turned his head to look at two very obvious eavesdroppers nearby. Seriously, why do you two have more expressions than us, the people actually talking? The two who had been quietly eating their staff meals together were, of course, Lockie and Sally, who were both on duty today. Since morning, they had been whispering non-stop, and by lunchtime, they were practically communicating through glances alone. Lockie shrugged. "How is that our fault? We really thought Sister Myra was finally going to reject you." "Exactly." Sally chimed in with a grin. "And you two have been acting strange since this morning," Lockie said, pointing his chopsticks at them. "It's like you're turning into Elzik and Biska." "Exactly." Sally chimed in. Lately, Elzik and Biska had been glued together, taking on missions as a team, sitting at the same table for meals, blushing whenever they exchanged a few words, and blushing even harder whenever someone teased them about how close they were. But despite all that, neither of them had confessed yet. Watching them was enough to make the entire guild want to tear their hair out from second-hand anxiety. And now Rhodes and Myra seemed to be headed down the same road. Rhodes glanced at Myra, then shot back. "We're different from them." Lockie immediately opened his mouth to ask what exactly was different, but before he could get a word out, bang! The guild doors swung open with a loud crash. "We're back!" Natsu shouted. "Aye, we're back!" Happy chimed in. Myra set down her bowl and chopsticks, smiling warmly. "Welcome back, Natsu, Happy. And don't kick the door." Yeah. Natsu brushed her off hurriedly. "Myra, help me find our next job." "All right." Myra was just about to stand up when Rhodes lightly pressed her shoulders down, guiding her back into her seat. "Natsu, let her finish eating first," Rhodes said calmly. "She's been busy all morning." Happy peeked out from behind Natsu's shoulder and whispered mischievously, "There's a connection here." Rhodes ignored him completely and asked, "You just got back. Why are you rushing to take another mission already?" "Because we're broke," Natsu said, practically shouting. "We have to get a job today." Happy added, waving his little arms. "It's all Natsu's fault. He accidentally set the merchant ship's mast on fire while trying to break the ice. So, we didn't get paid. If we don't work soon," Happy said pitifully, "we'll have to catch fish from the glaciers just to survive." Chapter 209, Natsu? Forest fire prevention? As expected of Natsu, Lockie muttered, shaking his head. It had been a while since Natsu caused a proper mess. "So miserable," Rhodes said casually, tracing a few lines in the air. "Want to eat fire?" "Ooh." Natsu opened his mouth and swallowed the flame Rhodes conjured up. "Thanks for the meal." Rhodes's flames did not taste particularly good, plain and simple, but they were enough to fill the stomach in a pinch. If Natsu wanted anything resembling a proper meal, though, he would have to buy real flame-cooked food. "Rhodes, can you draw a fish for me too?" Happy asked eagerly. "Sure," Rhodes said, waving his fingers. A glowing word, "fish," appeared in the air, complete with shimmering scales and fins. Happy grabbed it and bit down fiercely, but his expression instantly soured. "It's too hard. And it doesn't even taste good. It just smells a little like fish. Maybe the structure is too complicated." Rhodes shrugged. "Even Levy can only create decorative words, not ones you can actually eat. I suggest you go find Worm," Rhodes added with a smile. "I think he still has some real fish left." Sure enough, Happy scurried off and managed to coax a small fish out of Worm's stash. "Hey, Rhodes, you wanna join our team?" he asked hopefully. Rhodes laughed. "No thanks. I just got back yesterday. This month alone I have already done 2 long-range missions with Rosette and went to a regular council meeting with Master. I have not even had time to rest properly." Natsu clapped him on the shoulder sympathetically. "Man, you've had it rough." In Natsu's mind, teaming up with Rosette or attending a council meeting was the ultimate kind of suffering. Happy nodded. "Looks like it's just us again, Natsu." "What's with that tone, Happy?" Natsu protested. "Are you getting tired of teaming up with me? But we took 3 missions this week and only made 10,000 jewels." Happy whined. "The rest all went to repairs. If Rhodes came with us, we would have gotten full pay." "GRR. I'll show you," Natsu shouted, stomping over to the mission board. "I'll pick a job and we'll get full payment this time." Lately, he had been thinking a lot about what Master McRiv said before the S-Class promotion trial. If he could complete a few more jobs properly, No damages, full rewards. Maybe he would be eligible to take the trial this year. Watching Natsu's enthusiasm, Rhodes decided to help out a little. He rummaged through the available mission forms. The best mission for Natsu would probably be one where he could destroy things without worrying about consequences. Ideally, somewhere far from towns and people. Rhodes flipped through and found an interesting commission titled Mine Demolition. The foreman responsible for controlled demolitions was out sick, and the mining company needed a temporary replacement. It sounded perfect, until Rhodes saw that it was a coal mine. He silently put the form away. Nope. If Natsu set a coal mine on fire, not even selling the entire guild would be enough to pay for the damage. Rhodes kept searching until he found another card and grinned. Hey, Natsu, I found a good one for you. Interested? What is it? Natsu came bounding over. Forest Ranger. Rhodes said, holding up the commission sheet. During the dry winter season, wildfires were a huge risk. They needed a water wizard, or at least someone who could help prevent fires, to patrol the forest. Happy peered over Rhodes's arm and almost fell over laughing. Are you crazy, Rhodes? You want Natsu to be a forest ranger? Rhodes only smiled and shrugged. Of course it's fire prevention. Rhodes said matter-of-factly. Wherever there's a fire, Natsu just has to eat it, right? As long as someone supervises him and stops him from randomly breathing fire, it's perfect? Happy, you'll be in charge. Plus, you can fly around and patrol. Sounds ideal for you. Natsu was not an ordinary fire dragon's lair. As long as he did not start the fire himself, he could consume it without any problem. Natsu touched his chin thoughtfully. Sounds pretty good. Free wildfires to eat. The ideal outcome would be that there were no wildfires at all. Rhodes wanted to complain about Natsu's way of thinking, but Happy raised a concern. But the replacement rangers won't arrive for another half a month. The job period is a little long. Rhodes admitted. But they provide food and lodging. Plus, there's a river at the foot of the mountain. If you get bored, you can dig an ice hole and go fishing. Rhodes realized he was starting to sound suspiciously like a shady recruiter trying to trick kids into hard labor. Still, this mission really was perfect. The pay was generous, the work was manageable, and it would not interfere with Natsu's daily training. If anything, it would help him. Running long distances through the forest with a load on his back sounded just like the kind of rough training Natsu loved. Rhodes had seen Natsu's training methods before, leaping with a boulder on his back, getting chased by giant rolling stones, punching solid rocks barehanded. All very, very rough. Natsu was easily tempted. Alright, I'll take it. Happy chimed in excitedly. Being able to fish during work hours sounded like a dream. Let me take a look. Myra said, finishing her lunch quickly and walking over. Here it is. Rhodes said, handing her the commission slip. Myra scanned through the details carefully. Is there any problem? Rhodes asked. Everything looks fine. Myra said. But there are some rare trees growing in that forest. And at night, there might be wolves roaming nearby. You need to be careful. Natsu grinned confidently. Just a wolf pack? If they show up, I'll beat them all away. I think it's not the wolves we need to worry about. Rhodes said dryly. It's the rare trees. Happy agreed weakly, clearly unsure if he could actually keep Natsu in check. If Natsu ended up fighting the wolf pack, it was anyone's guess what kind of chaos he might cause. Myra, after checking the mission details again, confirmed that the task wasn't dangerous for Natsu. She gave the form a quick stamp and handed it back with a smile. Good luck. Just watch me. Natsu said, full of energy. Let's go, Happy. Aye, sir. Happy cheered. The two set off again, brimming with enthusiasm, as if they had completely forgotten about all their past mission failures. Everyone had their own way of living. Watching them leave, Rhodes sighed like an old man and went back to flipping through the mission board. Myra tilted her head and asked, "What are you still looking for?" "Same as before." Rhodes replied. "But didn't you say you were going to take a few days off?" "I am," Rhodes said. "But even during a break, it's good to keep an eye on opportunities. It would be a shame to miss the perfect job just because I wasn't paying attention." Myra didn't say anything more. Strictly speaking, Rhodes's behavior of pre-selecting missions even during his rest days wasn't entirely in line with the rules. But since Master Mikarov had turned a blind eye to it, and she herself didn't see a problem with it, it was fine. Still, Myra thought to herself, Rhodes has taken on a lot of work for the guild these past few months. Maybe he deserves a raise? Was that considered abusing her position for personal gain? No, Myra quickly corrected herself. Nothing had happened between them. They were clean and innocent. If anything, rewarding Rhodes for his hard work was only fair. It wasn't favoritism at all. "By the way," Rhodes said, pulling something out of his bag. "This is for you." A notebook? Myra asked curiously as she accepted it. Opening the cover, she saw Rhodes's name written neatly on the first page. Inside, the notebook was filled with records of missions. Dates, locations, objectives, and little sketches in the margins. Myra blinked. Giving a girl a used notebook? Was there something special hidden at the end? She flipped through until she reached a blank section in the middle. And two delicate, pressed flowers slipped into view. One was a soft winter sweet bloom. The other, a butterfly flower. Both were hardy blossoms that thrived in cold conditions, but they were rare near magnolia. The petals were still a little vibrant, and the paper had absorbed some of the flower's moisture, leaving faint wrinkles and smudges of color. Myra's hand flew to her mouth in surprise, her eyes lighting up. She had already guessed a little, but still asked softly. "Where did you find these?" Chapter 210, Snowstorm. "I saw them on the way back after the mission," Rhodes said, a hint of pride in his voice. "I thought they were beautiful, so I picked them. This winter sweet came from the Kingdom of Seven, and this butterfly flower from the Kingdom of Bosco. Pretty impressive to bring flowers back from two different countries in such a short time, right?" Even though the two kingdoms bordered each other closely, the fact remained that the flowers truly came from different lands. Myra knew that the battlefield they had traveled through was vast and treacherous, but none of that dulled the surprise blooming in her heart. In such a harsh, ancient battlefield, he had taken the time to find flowers from both kingdoms. What could have possibly been running through his mind while working? Myra's cheeks grew hot again. Was this guy seriously working hard out there? It was infuriating. "No, wait, he said he found them on the way back. So that means..." Myra gently closed the notebook and hugged it close to her chest. "I love it." "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm really glad you like it." Rhodes smiled. There wasn't much else worth bringing back as a souvenir from that place. Myra shook her head slightly, her smile tender and shy. This is the best gift. If he had brought something expensive, it would have made her uncomfortable. If he had written something overly sweet inside, she would have felt pressured. But this simple little surprise, delicate and thoughtful, was just right. When she turned to the page with the flowers, even though no words were written, the message was loud and clear. "He thought of me on his way back." Myra touched her warm cheeks again. What a cunning gift. Now the only problem was, how should she return the favor? The weather had been gloomy since morning, and by evening, soft snow had begun to fall. Compared to rainy days, a little snow didn't dampen the guild's spirits. Even Macau and Wakaba, known for their laziness, took on a mission today. Rhodes counted on his fingers and realized it was already the 21st. Ah, no wonder. The end of the month was close. Even the laziest members were scrambling to meet their quotas. Except for the familiar sight of Nab, still standing in front of the mission board, sketching endlessly. The only downside was the muddy, wet footprints being tracked all over the guild's entrance. "This is the worst part about snowy days," Rhodes muttered, grabbing a mop to clean the floor. "You're actually willing to leave the counter?" Lockie teased, laying down a mat inside the door and placing a rough wooden board outside to scrape the mud off boots. Rhodes didn't even flinch. "Distance creates beauty, Lockie. You wouldn't understand. Then maybe you should start keeping some distance from Myra, too." Lockie grinned mischievously. "No need." Rhodes shot back without missing a beat. "She's already beautiful enough." "You're shameless," Lockie said, laughing. "I've never seen you talk about Sister Myra so boldly." "Feel free to tell her," Rhodes said calmly. "I'm just telling the truth. Not bad-mouthing her behind her back." "You're hopeless." Lockie chuckled, shaking his head. "Absolutely hopeless. And it's great being hopeless," Rhodes said cheerfully. Just then, Myra called from the counter. "Can someone bring another heater over here? Rhodes wants to go." Lockie immediately snatched the mop from Rhodes's hands and shoved him forward. "Go on. Sister Myra's already getting cold without you around." Rhodes was pretty sure Myra didn't mean that quite so literally, but Lockie's words sounded way too nice to correct. "I should have looked around the old battlefield a bit more," Rhodes thought. "Maybe I could have found something Lockie would have liked too." He made his way to the warehouse to move the heater, the latest model they had bought just before winter. He and Myra had picked it out together. Myra had asked for another heater because the wind outside had picked up. The falling snow was no longer just flurries, but thick, steady flakes. The streets were already dusted white. If you opened a window now, you'd be greeted by a blast of cold wind straight to the face, slipping down your collar, and you'd be scolded by any poor soul standing near the window. The wind outside was sharp and biting, but inside the guild hall it was as warm and lively as ever. People drank, laughed, fought, and the bodyguards kept the peace like always. Amid all the noise and commotion, the day passed by quickly. Since anyone who dared open the door would immediately face a wall of freezing air, Most people decided to stay put inside the guild, reluctant to leave. Of course, this made Rhodes' shift run longer than usual, but luckily, it wasn't too bad. "It looks like I won't be able to train in the yard today," he said. Myra cracked open the door to the backyard. The moment she did, a gust of icy wind rushed in, tossing her long hair into the air. Heavy snow had been falling for hours now. In the faint glow of the outside lamps, you could see the training equipment buried under thick, puffy layers of snow. Rhodes took one look and nodded. "Yeah, definitely not a good idea. It's way too cold. You should head home early. Indoor meditation and light training at home would have to do for today. Maybe the guild should really consider building a gym," he thought half-jokingly. The two of them bundled up in their coats. Myra helped Rhodes tie his scarf again, gently correcting his clumsy hands. Rhodes, determined to prove he had learned something, showed off his newly acquired scarf-tying skills in return. But this time, he noticed something he hadn't before: girls with long hair had to tie their scarves a little differently. It took a few tries, and Myra had to pull her hair slightly out of the way to help him. Once they were both wrapped up snugly with scarves and hats, they double-checked each other to make sure they wouldn't catch a chill. Satisfied, they locked up the guild together and headed off into the snowy streets. Several guild members who had left late and lingered behind happened to catch sight of them. The snow outside the guild was crisscrossed with messy footprints leading in all directions. But as they walked farther along the quiet streets, the prints became fewer and fewer, until it was just the two of them, leaving fresh tracks in the untouched snow. The two of them walked side by side through the quiet streets toward Myra's house. On a freezing night like this, hardly anyone was wandering around. But here and there, behind the warm glow of windows, people leaned against the glass, watching the snow fall. The lucky ones caught a glimpse of a young couple bundled up tightly against the cold, walking close together down the street, a round, fluffy creature waddling faithfully behind them. Under the dim light of the street lamps, you could just barely make out the girl's face. She looked a lot like Fairy Tale's famous poster girl. Miss Mara Jane. Does she have a boyfriend? No. Maybe it's her brother? But, wait. Her brother was supposed to be bigger than that. What a strong wind. Miles per hour. Rhodes tried to say, but the moment he opened his mouth, a gust of icy wind rushed in. He quickly ducked his face back into his scarf. Myra didn't say anything. She simply reached out and grabbed onto the sleeve of Rhodes's coat with both hands, making it look as if they were walking arm in arm. In truth, she was just worried about the slippery roads. The strong winds made it hard to keep balance, and grabbing his sleeve helped her stay steady. The demon Mara Jane, feared by so many in the past, was now just a slightly clumsy girl trying to keep from slipping on the ice. Of course it was natural for her to grab onto Rhodes's sleeve. Rhodes walked half a step ahead of her, shielding her as best he could from the gusts of wind and swirling snow coming from the side and front. As for why he didn't summon any beasts to help them block the wind, well, why would he? If he weren't worried it would seem too obvious. Even Worm wouldn't have been allowed to tag along right now. Rhodes had to admit, the heavy coat he'd splurged on was worth every jewel. Even in weather like this, he barely felt the cold. Myra's scarf was just as good, thick and tightly knitted, it kept the wind firmly out. Slowly, the three figures made their way through the snowy streets, leaving a line of footprints behind them, stretching all the way to Myra's front door. Chapter 211, The warmth beneath the snow. Even though it was late, staying overnight at Myra's house was out of the question. If Rhodes didn't have a place to stay or lived far away, he might have been able to make an excuse. But unfortunately, none of those conditions applied. The door closed firmly behind him, and Rhodes could only walk back with Worm trailing behind. Still, he was in a great mood. Just before he left, Myra had broken all the rules of martial arts and sneak attacked him. When he turned around, she had hugged him tightly from behind. By the time he tried to respond, she had already bolted into the house and slammed the door shut. Too much, Rhodes thought, grinning. She hugged me and ran. I'll definitely hug her back properly next time. For now, he hugged Worm instead. 5 seconds later, Rhodes grimaced and set Worm back down. The little guy's paws and legs were covered in melting snow, soaking him through. Rhodes made a mental note, next time, don't let him walk directly in the snow. Summon, Scuttle Crab. It was better to use a proper ride at times like this. Being cold-blooded, the crab wasn't bothered by the cold at all. Rhodes picked up Worm and climbed onto the crab's broad back. Just as he settled in, he felt a gaze on him. He looked up, and locked eyes with someone peeking out from an upstairs window. They waved at each other through the snowfall, both smiling quietly as they looked forward to a new day. The new day began with snow clearing. When Rhodes stepped outside, Goodman hadn't arrived yet. The snow in front of the guild was already half a meter deep. Goodman was probably still clearing his own doorstep. All around, Neighbors had already begun their work. As usual, everyone would clear a narrow path from their front door to the main road, then sweep a short stretch on either side of the road. It was an unspoken rule of Magnolia. Each house did their part, and when the sections connected, a complete road would appear. In the countryside, without sanitation workers, this neighborly habit was even more important. The widths of the cleared paths varied. Some wide, some narrow. But that only made them feel more human, like strings of heartfelt connections linking everyone together. Since Goodman wasn't around yet, Rhodes took it upon himself to clear the snow. He remembered the elderly woman who lived next door. They hadn't spoken much before, but even so, he decided to clear her path too. On the other side of the old woman's house was an older man, slightly younger than Goodman, who seemed to have the same idea. They didn't exchange many words, just each quietly cleared half the work, and when they finished, they shared a smile before heading back inside. But the work wasn't done yet. After clearing the road, the next big task was clearing the rooftops. If the snow on the roof wasn't removed in time, it would seep into the roof once it melted, and then refreeze at night, causing swelling and damage. Worse, too much snow could collapse a house under its weight. Plus, sharp icicles often formed under the eaves, posing a danger to anyone passing by. Getting onto the roof was easy for Rhodes. He didn't even need a ladder. With a quick summon, he called forth a raptor and flew up gracefully. He didn't want to risk slipping and making a fool of himself by climbing up manually. Once on the roof, Rhodes grabbed a snow shovel and started pushing heavy heaps of snow off the edges. Every whoomp as the snow hit the ground reminded him just how heavy it was. While working, he spotted a mischievous father next door pushing snow right onto his son's head while the boy was building a snowman. Rhodes winced. That guy's definitely getting an earful from his wife later. After finishing his own roof, Rhodes planned to help the elderly neighbor too, but first, he knew he should properly ask for permission. Otherwise, it would have been a real mess if he accidentally dropped snow on the grandmother. "Good boy, have a cup of hot tea first," the grandmother said warmly, clearly delighted by Rhodes' visit. She not only poured him a cup of tea but also pulled out all kinds of snacks and fruits from her cabinets. Some of the snacks looked like they had been stored for a while, and the apples were a little wrinkled. Things she normally would have saved for herself were now laid out generously to entertain a guest. There was no reason to refuse such kindness. Rhodes picked up a snack and nibbled it with his tea. It was a little hard, but the taste was just fine. "I remember," the grandmother said cheerfully. "You're renting Goodman's place, and you're one of those wizards from fairy tale, right?" "That's right. I moved in last summer," Rhodes replied, smiling. "My, that's been quite a while, hasn't it?" "Last summer," she mused. The old lady seemed lonely. With a guest finally visiting, she naturally wanted to chat for a while. Rhodes actually wanted to get back to work quickly so he could swing by the guild and see what Myra and the others were up to. But there was no real rush. He could always spare some time to sit and talk. And so, Rhodes listened as she shared all sorts of little neighborhood stories, how Goodman's father had picked the name Bayer for his son, how the couple next door often quarreled over their children, and how a certain fruit vendor always placed the nicest fruits on top but swapped a few battered ones onto the scale when weighing. The topics bounced around a lot, but they all shared a theme: small, everyday things that happened right around her. They might not have been valuable news, or even particularly interesting, but the old woman's joy in simply having someone listen was unmistakable. Rhodes waited patiently until he noticed she had begun repeating herself, a sure sign it was time to move on. He gently set his teacup down and said, "It's warmed up a bit now. I should get to clearing the snow off your roof." "Oh, okay. Thank you, dear. Please stay inside while I work," Rhodes added kindly. "Don't stand under the eaves." With that, he grabbed his tools and headed upstairs. After a little while shoveling, Rhodes paused to straighten his back. From his rooftop perch, he could see others working on nearby roofs too. It was almost like a scene out of a winter painting. Thanks to his sharp eyesight, Rhodes spotted someone already moving around atop the fairy tale guild roof. Rhodes quickened his pace, bid the old lady farewell after finishing the snow clearing, and hurried toward the guild. The sun had risen, but the snow showed no signs of melting. Water stains pooled at the edges of the road where the snow met the ground, making it slippery in places. As soon as he stepped into the guild, he was greeted by Myra's warm but mischievous voice. "You're late. I'm docking your pay." Rhodes froze, his heart sinking. Yesterday she had ambushed him with a hug, and today she was stabbing him in the back? No way. "I was late because I helped the neighbor's grandmother clear the snow," he explained earnestly. Myra gave a small nod, as if reluctantly approving. "In that case, you're forgiven." Relieved, Rhodes asked, "How's everything going at the guild?" "We've almost finished clearing the snow here," Myra replied, pulling on her coat. There's enough people around now. We're going out soon to help clear the snow in town. Before Rhodes could say anything else, Myra added, I have to head home first. Rhodes, who had just unbuttoned the top of his coat, quietly fastened it back up. Elfman's not back yet? Myra shook her head. No. He should be back today or tomorrow. With the road conditions like this, it's tough to move the carriage. I see. Rhodes said, falling into step beside her without hesitation. Myra glanced sideways at him, lightly pinching his arm. Why was he following her so naturally, like he belonged there? Rhodes only smiled. With their thick winter coats on, she couldn't even hurt him. He looked at her playfully, clearly understanding her unspoken thoughts. It almost felt like she was the one dragging him home. Chapter 212, Why Are You in My House? Elfman had set out early in the morning. His job site wasn't far from home, about an hour's walk at most. Still, if he didn't head back soon, his sister would end up doing all the housework herself. And on top of that, she had the guild to look after. It was too much for one person. But in weather like this, it wasn't easy to rent a carriage at dawn, so Elfman made the decision to walk all the way back. A man faces the snow head-on. He muttered with resolve, trudging through the drifts. By the time he arrived in Magnolia, most of the streets had already been cleared. Every few blocks, he could spot a familiar guildmate helping shovel paths or fix rooftops. He even saw Master Makarov in giant form, using his enormous hands to repair an entire roof in just 2 swipes. What a manly mistake. I should have come back sooner. When Elfman finally reached his house, he found the path to the front door already swept and the snow from the roof neatly piled along the road. His sister must have done it all herself. She must be exhausted. Feeling guilty, he opened the door with quiet determination. Elfman, you're back? Welcome home, Elfman. As soon as he stepped inside, Elfman was met with an odd scene. Rhodes was sitting comfortably on the living room sofa, flipping through the latest issue of Sorcerer Weekly with a cup of tea in hand. Myra had just returned from the kitchen with a plate of cookies, smiling as she sat down across from him. The warmth in the room, the tea, the cookies, the casual chat. It all painted a cozy domestic atmosphere. Elfman blinked. Did I walk into the wrong house? He backed up a few steps and looked around. No, this was definitely his home, not the guild. I'm back. He mumbled, still a little dazed. You look frozen. Come sit down and warm up with some tea. Myra said with a gentle smile. Did you eat anything this morning? I was in a hurry. I didn't have time. I'll make you something, then. She said, already getting up. Rhodes, stay seated. Rhodes watched as Myra quickly tied her hair up into a ponytail, slipped on an apron, and headed into the kitchen. From the fridge, she took out bread, eggs, lettuce, and milk. Her movements were practiced and elegant. The way she moved, confident and composed, apron tied neatly behind her, it was enough to make Rhodes feel like he'd married the perfect wife. Oh. Wait. He hadn't married her yet. Across from him, Elfman sat down with a scowl, glaring hard enough to crack stone. The scar across his face only added to his intimidating presence. Unfortunately for him, Rhodes had grown immune. After so many face-to-face meetings, he'd gotten used to it. With an easy grin, Rhodes poured Elfman a cup of tea, nudged the snacks his way, and said shamelessly. Come on, don't hold back. Make yourself at home. Thank you. This is my home. Elfman nearly snapped, barely keeping his composure. What I mean is, why are you here? Rhodes straightened up and replied earnestly. I came to help out. Myra's been busy all morning. She didn't even have time to shovel the snow around the house. I meant. Elfman gritted through his teeth. Why you specifically? Based on our friendship. Rhodes said, placing a hand over his heart with exaggerated sincerity. Is it really that strange for me to help? It wasn't exactly strange, but the scene Elfman had walked in on was definitely weird. He'd expected to find Myra tired and maybe cleaning up, not Rhodes lounging on his sofa with tea and cookies like he belonged there. It felt like he was losing his sister. Sure, Elfman had long accepted that someday Myra would probably start dating someone. But that someday felt like it was supposed to be way later. How did things escalate this fast? Rhodes went on one mission with Riza and came back practically glued to Myra. Did Myra and Riza swap places while he was gone and Myra went on the mission instead? No. Something else must have happened. Elfman wasn't the kind of guy to overthink things, but now, he was staring Rhodes down, sizing him up like he was deciding the best moment to throw a punch. And while Rhodes was certainly no slouch in a fight, the ever-manly Elfman refused to lose ground. Not when it came to this. It's breakfast time. Myra announced, setting 2 plates and mugs down in front of them. It was a simple meal, sandwiches and milk, quick and easy to make. She knew Rhodes usually ate his breakfast at the guild, But today, since he'd followed her straight from there without stopping, she figured she might as well make something for him too. Thanks. Rhodes grinned brightly and took a big bite, thoroughly enjoying the food. Elfman, meanwhile, ate in complete silence. His expression didn't change once. Myra sat nearby, resting her chin in her hands, elbows propped on her knees. She watched the two of them from the side, smiling quietly. It had been a long time since they'd had a guest over. In fact, the last time the three of them sat down for breakfast like this was well over a year ago. This peaceful scene, though simple, warmed her heart. Myra glanced left and right at the two sitting across from her and quietly thought to herself that if life could go on like this, warm, simple, and full of small comforts, it wouldn't be such a bad thing. But did Elfman really have to glare so intensely? Was his relationship with Rhodes still that awkward? After breakfast, the three of them left home together to join the others in town. The entire Fairy Tale Guild had rallied to help with snow removal efforts in Magnolia. Master Mikrov had given strict instructions. Aside from a few people he personally approved, no one was allowed to use magic. This wasn't a commission or a paid job. It was something the guild did out of their own goodwill. The focus was on helping the elderly and anyone who didn't have others around to support them, just like Rhodes had done earlier that morning. Next came important roads, bridges, and public gathering areas. Even though there was no reward involved, everyone worked with full effort. Watching it all unfold, Rhodes felt like he finally understood something. Fairy Tale might be known as wild and reckless, but few people in Magnolia truly disliked them. That affection wasn't just because they were strong or famous. It was built on things like this, their willingness to step up and help with small acts of kindness. They genuinely cared about this town. And in return, the townsfolk welcomed them with open hearts. Crash. The sound of breaking glass rang out from a nearby house. A furious voice followed. You little bastard. That snowball broke my window. Sorry. I'll pay for it. Marcus called back, pulling out some jewel coins like he'd done this before. Rhodes looked up at the gray sky and sighed. Yeah. The guild and the townspeople definitely had a special kind of relationship. The peaceful days went by quickly, and before long, January had passed. Winter was still hanging around, but signs of warming had started to show. Rhodes felt especially warm when he received his paycheck. There was something about getting paid that just filled the heart with joy. Wait. Why is this so much? Rhodes blinked, looking down at the amount. He usually earned 120,000 J per month. And during mission periods, he wasn't paid for his tavern work. But last month, he'd gone on 3 long-distance missions. Now his paycheck read 150,000 J. Because you helped the master with some of his duties last month. Myra explained with a little smile. Your salary got bumped up. I was going to tell you, but I got a little busy at the end of the month and forgot. Rhodes narrowed his eyes. Suspicious. Busy? He remembered perfectly well she had at least 2 dates that week. She didn't look busy. Maybe she was just avoiding guild talk after hours. He leaned in close, shoulder to shoulder, and whispered near her ear. Are you using your authority for personal gain? Don't be ridiculous. Myra replied calmly. It's a standard salary adjustment. The master approved it himself. She gave him a firm shove. And if you really don't want the extra, I'll gladly take it back. Rhodes thought for a second, then grinned. I guess you can hold on to it for me. But isn't it a little early to be handing over my entire salary? Smack. Her fist hit his chest, loud and solid. The tavern went quiet for a moment before someone sighed. Chapter 213, appears in the news in a weird way. Getting a raise was always a good thing. Rhodes had been worrying about saving enough to eventually buy a house. He once thought that holding over 2 million jewels made him something of a small-time rich guy. But after looking into housing prices in Magnolia, even affording 1/10 of that dream felt optimistic. If he relied solely on his current wages, it would take 20 years just to save enough for a modest home. Of course, the local banks offered loan services, and their policies for wizards were relatively generous, but in the end, it still meant decades of steady work. Magnolia was a thriving city where magic was everywhere. For your average wizard, settling down here took years of effort and discipline. Rhodes had it slightly better. He could take on tougher jobs and earn more. If he kept pushing himself, he could probably pull it off within a few years. And if he shamelessly clung to Riz's coattails like he did last month, maybe he wouldn't even need to. Then again, there were other options. Like moving outside the city. He could do what Natsu and Happy did, build a little house on the outskirts. Or go the eccentric route like Ms. Poorly Uzuka and set up a treehouse in the forest. It was cheap and completely free from interference, but definitely inconvenient. Even buying a bottle of milk could become an expedition. There was also the option of moving back in with your folks, like the newcomer Dono. But his commute took 3 hours by carriage just to get to the guild. Adding the return trip? Pure nightmare fuel. All things considered, Rhodes still preferred the idea of digging in and working harder to settle down in Magnolia. If he could get even a bit stronger, maybe even qualify as an S-class wizard, his earnings would skyrocket. "What are you thinking about?" Myra asked, noticing him deep in thought, frowning slightly while holding his salary in both hands. "Worried about how to spend it?" "Close. I'm more worried about how to make more of it," Rhodes replied. "I've been thinking about settling down here in Magnolia, properly." "Settle down?" Myra tilted her head. "You're thinking about buying a house?" "Yeah. This city's amazing, right?" "Of course it is." Myra completely understood his thinking but added gently. "Just don't rush. Trying to do it all at once will wear you out." Rhodes nodded. "This is a long-term goal," he said with a smile. "No need to push myself too hard all at once." "Don't look at me like that while saying long-term goal," Myra muttered and quickly retreated behind the counter, a faint pink rising to her cheeks. She could help him financially, a little at least, but there wasn't really a good label for that. No, she told herself, it's way too early to be thinking about that. Lockie's voice rang out across the hall. "Rhodes, 2 beers over here." "Myra, we need a roast chicken." "Coming right up." Myra called back. "On it," Rhodes said, grabbing the mugs and pouring drinks. Despite being known in the guild as Mr. Rich lately thanks to his big missions, Rhodes and Myra were still just 2 hard-working teammates making sure everyone had a drink and a hot meal. Staying humble never went out of style. Rhodes was still the same as ever. Whenever he had downtime at the guild, he would browse through the available job postings. From time to time, he picked out those long-ignored requests, often the ones with low pay or little excitement, just to lend a hand. When Myra had some free time, she would join him. Together, they took on simple jobs that most guild members overlooked. Sometimes it was finding a missing cat or dog. Other times, it involved mediating neighbor disputes, which Rhodes never quite understood. Why would people hire wizards to settle arguments over fences and barking dogs? These mundane tasks weren't profitable, and they certainly weren't glamorous. But Rhodes and Myra didn't mind. They treated them like themed dates, small adventures with a purpose. Going out like that now and then was refreshing. It helped clear out old requests from the guild board and gave them an excuse to spend time together. It was a win-win for both the guild and themselves. However, this habit came with some unintended consequences. February 19th, Wednesday. It was the release day of the latest issue of Sorcerer Weekly. For the second time in his life, Rhodes found himself featured in the magazine, and in a way he didn't expect. "Rumored boyfriend of famed model Mara Jane Strauss?" That was the headline. The article explained that their recent interactions had grown a little too close to be just friendly. There were eyewitness accounts of the two eating together, walking side by side while shopping, and even buying flowers on Valentine's Day, no less. The picture showed the two of them from behind. Rhodes's face wasn't visible, but Myra was turned slightly toward him, smiling in a way that made her instantly recognizable. As for Rhodes, the article reused a photo from 6 months ago, the one from when he was dubbed Fairy Tale's strongest newcomer. In truth, nothing dramatic had happened that day. At most, he hugged Myra a little longer than usual when dropping her off at her door. Elfman didn't seem to care. He had already challenged Rhodes seriously once and considered things settled. He just hadn't expected one of the onlookers to turn out to be a gossip. Rhodes wasn't upset about the article. But he was a little worried for Myra. "Will this hurt your popularity?" he asked. "Maybe." Myra replied with a small smile. "Jenny said it could affect things. But it doesn't really matter. I don't have to keep modeling. And..." Myra glanced at Rhodes and said calmly, "I'm not following the same path as before." She had already thought things through when she agreed to model for Hartgrews's new collection. Recalling the theme Rhodes had chosen during her fashion face-off with Jenny in the Capitol, and the subtle feedback he'd given during the Miss Fairy Tale pageant, Myra had a strong feeling he wasn't entirely comfortable with her doing overly revealing or provocative modeling. Although she had never been too bothered by it herself, she figured it wouldn't hurt to take his feelings into account moving forward. Rhodes tilted his head, a little surprised. "Wait, even Sorcerers publishes articles that might hurt your reputation?" Myra smiled faintly. "That's because it might not hurt my reputation at all. I haven't released anything new lately. A sudden article like this? It could actually have a positive effect. Even if it doesn't help my image, it'll boost magazine sales. That's enough to make it worthwhile." Rhodes scratched his chin thoughtfully. "You know, I could just shut down the rumors." "How?" "By announcing it's not a rumor but the truth." Myra didn't even need him to say it out loud. She could already guess where he was headed. So she gently raised the tray in her hands, eyes narrowing into a playful warning. Say it out loud, and I'll hit you. All right, I surrender. Rhodes laughed, backing down with mock fear. I'll change the subject. I'm heading out to train. No progress yet? Myra asked gently. She knew he had been stuck recently, unable to summon a new beast. Not really. Maybe I'm lacking magical power, or maybe I just haven't studied the rift thoroughly enough. Rhodes replied, fingering the pendant he wore around his neck. Based on his summoning pattern so far, the next creature should have been either the Rift Herald or the dragon. But whenever he tried using his consciousness to explore Summoner's Rift, the fog of war around the dragon's den remained dense and impenetrable. To make matters worse, the barren pit was still crawling with void drubs. He wasn't even sure if the Rift Herald still existed, or what would happen if he tried to summon it. Would he have to clear out all the void creatures first? And if he summoned the Rift Herald now, would that prevent him from ever summoning the dragon later? For now, all he could do was continue his explorations and keep increasing his magical output. Based on how much magic he'd used to summon the Brambleback and Blue Sentinel before, the next beast, whichever it was, would likely require an even greater amount. So, for now, there was no shortcut. Just more training. Chapter 214, Takeover, Brambleback I'm back. As always, the front doors of Fairy Tale creaked ominously, right before Natsu kicked them open again. Locky. He called out, his voice sharp. Where's Rhodes? Locky, who was closest, flinched. Hey. You know how hard it is to fix the doors when you bust him, Natsu. But Natsu was already storming through the guild hall like a volcano with legs. Don't shout so loud. Locky groaned. Rhodes either in the backyard, the library, or with Myra. Go find him yourself. Natsu flung his backpack aside and bolted for the backyard. He could already smell Rhodes' scent, familiar and ready to fight. Happy picked up the tossed bag with a sigh and floated over to the front desk, submitting their mission paperwork. Myra tilted her head. What's with Natsu? He seems riled up. Did the mission go badly? Aye. Happy flopped down dramatically. The client for that forest ranger job Rhodes picked for us was a total nightmare. We were supposed to work for 15 days, but then they extended it to 20, and then even longer. Even though we're getting paid per day, they kept adding more and more weird rules. He rolled his eyes. That sounds rough. Myra gave a sympathetic sigh. Wizards sometimes ran into clients like that. As long as the requests weren't unreasonable, most of them just bore with it. Natsu was the type to break a wall before breaking a contract. He'd caused his fair share of trouble over the years, but he'd never once raised a hand against a client. Still, being bossed around for that long without a proper fight clearly drove him stir-crazy. So the whole trip back, all except the time he was busy being carsick, he'd been fantasizing about punching Rhodes. Take this, Rhodes. Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. Whoa, what the hell, Natsu? Out in the backyard, Rhodes was in the middle of sprint drills when Natsu charged him out of nowhere and opened with a flaming punch. If Rhodes hadn't dodged on instinct, his handsome face would have needed Myra's healing touch. Don't even ask. Just fight me. Fine, then let's fight. It had been a while since the two sparred properly anyway. Boom. Their fists collided with a blast of heat and force. Flames erupted from Natsu's knuckles, while Rhodes met him with a solid punch of his own, his hand covered in dense stone armor, courtesy of his Krug form. While he typically preferred the Merc Wolf form, its natural fur didn't mix well with fire, so the Krug was a better match against Natsu. Rhodes had gotten quite good at using partial and full-body takeover magic. Right now, he was using partial takeover, only coating his arms with the Krug's durability. It looked like Earth-style magic. And if he shouted Earth Dragon's Rock Fist, someone unfamiliar might believe it. Bam. Crack. Thud. Fists flew, knees struck, and boots slammed into the ground as fire and stone clashed in a blazing, dusty dance. Every one of Natsu's attacks came laced with heat. Rhodes' blocks timed perfectly, each one sprouting stone armor on the spot. It was flashy, it was fierce, and it was effective. A visual feast for anyone watching. It also showed just how much Rhodes had improved his control over takeover magic. That was thanks to Myra's patient instruction, and Elfman, who'd put in the hours as a dedicated sparring partner. But there was one downside to this reaction-based, adaptive combat style. It was exhausting. Rhodes gritted his teeth. Man. I really need to work on my reflexes. At first, things were manageable, but as Natsu started getting more serious, Rhodes found it increasingly difficult to keep up using just partial takeover. After all, Natsu wasn't the kind of opponent you could handle with a few tricks. Full-body takeover, Krug. Fire Dragon's crushing fang. Flame surged like a dragon's claws, crashing down onto Rhodes' shoulders. He raised his forearms to block, leaving behind 3 glowing burn marks etched into the stone armor covering them. Rhodes struck back with a sharp knee to Natsu's stomach, but Natsu quickly planted his hands on the ground and flipped backward. "When did you get so tough?" Natsu called out, rubbing his stomach as he landed. Rhodes cracked his knuckles and grinned. "Got hit a lot. Come here and let me hit you 100 times too, you'll get tough real fast." "Liar." Fire Dragon's wing attack. Waves of flame swept down like the wings of a mighty dragon. But just before impact, Rhodes seemed to melt into the ground, sinking below the surface like he'd stepped into water. Natsu landed with a loud thud, only to feel his ankles grabbed from below. Rhodes yanked him into the ground, leaving just his head sticking out. Jumping out of the ground himself, Rhodes looked at his scorched training dummies and groaned. "You flame-brained pyromaniac. Are you trying to burn down the guild? You talk too much." "I didn't actually burn it down," Natsu shouted from the dirt. Flames burst from Natsu's feet, launching him from the ground like a firework. He charged at Rhodes, one arm raised in a classic punch. Fire Dragon's iron fist. Rhodes met the strike head-on, but the force pushed him backward through a wooden wall. His chest and arms were now charred black from the impact. "Great," Rhodes muttered. "He's wrecked the place again. Natsu really is cursed. Take over, Brambleback." In an instant, Rhodes transformed. His body shot up to nearly 3 meters tall, wrapped in thick vines and bark-like plating.